Okay, Madam Chair, you can call it to order.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:04 a.m. on October 26th, and welcome to the meeting of the State of Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. Carol, would you call roll and let us know if we've got a quorum?
Sure. Chair Canseco,
Present.
Mr. Blamowitz,
Present.
Mr. Brumley,
Present.
Dr. Fletcher,
Present.
Mr. Francis,
Cheerfully here.
Mr. Hallbauer,
Present.
Mr. Morris,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Present.
and Dr. Taylor.
Here.
All council members are present, ma'am. You got a quorum.
Thank you. Let's begin with welcoming everybody. Thanks for attending. This is my first hybrid meeting where I'm actually in the office and everyone else is remoted in, and I'm happy to be here and awake. Let's begin with item 3, which is report from Executive Director. Daryl, you've got quite a lengthy discussion.
Sure. Most of the information provided in the ED's report this morning is going to be just informational only, no action and no, I'm not anticipating any discussion, but obviously if y'all have any questions. The Q4 performance measures include both our quarterly performance measures and our annual performance measures. Some performance measures we report to you on a quarterly basis, some on an annual basis. Since the fiscal year 2021 is now concluded, I've given you the annual performance measures. And I've also provided you with the typical calculations as well there. So if anybody has any questions over that, I'll be happy to answer them. But otherwise, I'll just let the report speak for themselves.
Any highlights that you want to point out?
The one highlight that I would point out, let's see if I can find where that is. Average, of course, the average complaint resolution time is probably the one that I watch the most in the quarterly, and I'll share my screen with you real quick. Y'all can see what I'm talking about. The average complaint resolution time is just kind of what it says, is how long on average it takes us to resolve a complaint. What I'd like you to look at is, while the year to date was 856, obviously that number has gotten consistently better, but the quarterly one was 667. What that tells me is that the number of complaints in backlog is dropping significantly, and more of the complaints that we're receiving now since BHEC has begun operation are going out the door and being resolved because that average is going down. So that's a good sign. We're headed definitely in the right direction there. So in fact, our quarterly average for processing complaints is actually below what our target is for 2022 and 2023. So, which is 750 days. So we're actually under our target. Had we done fiscal quarter 4 under this performance measure, we would actually be ahead of where we're supposed to be. So we're doing good.
I have to say that I accidentally printed all 97 pages while I was at home reviewing things. And I went through these pages in particular. High praise for you and your leadership and your team. Every single one of those % of annual targets was, I think everything except one tiny one was over. It's really impressive work. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna tell y'all right now, it ain't me, it's your staff that are doing it. Between the investigators, between the enforcement staff and Patrick and his staff, they're the ones that are kind of making the magic happen on the enforcement side.
But they can't do it without an excellent leader. So my compliments to everybody.
Well, thank you. I'll pass along y'all's praise to them. But other than that, that is all I've got on the quarterly reports. Year-to-date financial reports. Again, that's just a kind of a monthly budget that I provide y'all to kind of give you some idea of where we're at. I don't have anything to really report on that other than to tell you that we spent most of the money that we had been appropriated last year. Some of it we actually lapsed and had to go back because of unspent, basically vacant positions is really what resulted in a lot of the lapse funding. Now there's a difference between some of the money that you saw go back last year, and I think I covered this last meeting. Some of the money you saw go back last year was unspent set startup cost money. And so we're not going to get that money back. That was just a one-time deal that the ledge had given us, and we came in considerably under budget there, thanks to Jenny and Linda, kind of doing a really good job at managing our funds for us. And then the unspent salary money, now we will continue to get that, because again, that was just because of vacancies in the staffing is why we had excess fundage there, but we let it lapse rather than just, spending it. We didn't need anything. The legislature had given us everything we needed, so we really didn't need anything, so we gave it back, which in my opinion is not a bad thing to do. Y'all were a brand new agency set up to be more efficient. You were more efficient. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. So there's no shame in that.
I think that also helps if we need more money for something, to show that we gave it back when we didn't need it. Sure helps.
I hope so. I hope it operates as good credit, that when we tell them, hey, we need this, and if we don't spend it, we'll give it back to you. Because now y'all got a track record of not spending more than what you actually need to spend.
Yeah.
So I hope that pays off for us in the future. The next item on my report is the update on the licensing and processing times. The main thing I want to here, we're going to look at the September averages is what I'm showing now. Again, guys, we're all moving in the right direction. Nothing seems to be moving in the wrong direction. So I don't know what to tell you other than, again, your licensing staff. What Mari and Woodsy are doing over there is working. So let's keep headed in that direction. This chart that you're seeing now this is probably the last time you see this chart, because there's just not going to be anything left on it. You see, as of September 30th, there's literally only 94 apps left pending, and those are all applications that we have what's called a manual hold on, which means staff is working with those individuals on a one-on-one basis to cure some kind of deficiency or problem in their application. Everything else has been taken care of. It's either the application is either expired, or they've been processed and licensed, or the application was denied. So this will be the last time that you see this particular report, because we have tackled all but the applications that staff are working on a one-on-one basis with. That is, and then I've also included in here, I wanted to show y'all kind of to give you some idea of what our staffing level is currently. You've got a spreadsheet that lists all the staff positions that are filled and those that are vacant, to give you some idea of kind of where we're at. We've got several vacancies in the licensing division. We've got one vacancy in the admin, which is an attorney. We lost both of our attorneys that handled the LPC board, but we've hired one. She'll start on December 1st. And then we've got several positions vacant on the licensing side. Now, 4 of those positions are the brand new positions that the legislature gave us. There's only one that was an existing position that is actually vacant. And then on the enforcement side, we've got like 6 vacancies, I believe is what it is. So I'll tell y'all right now, it's a tough market. If any of y'all have done any hiring for your companies, your industry, it's a tough market right now. And we're in a really tough marketplace in here in Austin, Texas. So if we were in San Angelo or, Tyler, Texas, it might be a little different story, but we're not. We're in one of the more.
Darryl, what's been the impact on ISCs for the LPC board because of those 2 vacancies?
I don't think there's been any impact on the ISC. Patrick, jump in here if I make sure I'm not telling a fib.
Well, I mean, it's slowed down a bit, but I mean, there's still things that we're trying to do to move cases, but we do have somebody starting December 1st to transition that I think we can transition a lot to keep things rolling, keep things moving. But yeah, I mean, we've tried to transition all the emergent sort of cases that are filed at SOA and things like that, so that the ball doesn't get dropped for any of the LPC cases. But new ISCs are not going to get scheduled probably until we get the new attorneys hired for LPC, because swapping them back and forth, really, the cases isn't probably the best way of handling those. And so, but I'm hopeful we'll get the other spot filled soon as well. So hopefully not too much of a slowdown, but it will be a little bit of a slowdown.
Patrick, do we have the other attorneys? Are they working on LPC complaints as they come in, sending out NOVs?
Not necessarily. They're working on some of the cases, but they're really just taking taking the cases that are priorities. There are some things that instead of having them all pile up on all the other attorneys, because we still have the other attorneys tasked with also helping with social work and their own primary boards. So we're trying to prioritize things that we can move, but they're not doing the full function of all of having the staff.
So the priority 1s and 2s and 3s are getting looked at, but the 4s, which are basically everything but sexual misconduct, imminent physical harm, and applicants.
Right.
All that stuff is going to have to kind of wait a little bit until we get some more bandwidth. Okay.
Correct.
I have a question just about the job market in general. Are you seeing a lack of applicants, a lack of qualified applicants? I'm curious, does the pay scale not meet what's needed in Austin? What do you see as the main threats, or whatever combination of that you're seeing? Curious.
Well, on the attorney side, Patrick, how many applicants did you get for the 2 positions we posted?
The first round I had 3, and the second round I have 1 right now. So I hired 1 off the first round, and the second round is still open right now. So, but we have 1 so far.
Here's part of the problem, John. I think candidly, probably we're going to have to ask for more money on the attorney positions to make sure we stay competitive. Because while we set the pay ranges for the attorneys kind of middle of the road of what, according to the state auditor's office, is what they call E-class system, which tells me here's what the average salary is, the high end, the low end, the mean, and the average. I can figure that out from that system. We're kind of right in the middle. The problem is that was pre-pandemic days.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I think we're going to have to probably increase that, ask for some additional funding on that. I will tell you, just from looking at the exit surveys on the people that do leave, money is a big issue. And I know, well, I got to be careful here because I don't want to divulge something I'm not allowed to divulge, but money is the single biggest issue that we're having trouble competing with.
Yeah, I can imagine that in Austin with cost of living. I mean, the cost of living increases literally, like the data can't keep up with the actual cost of living increases in housing and everything else, especially everything going around Austin right now.
And, I mean, additionally, I know the whole working from home thing has, we've tried to be pretty flexible in that approach and allow that. Like in enforcement, we've just had to force them to work from home because we don't have any place for them. They have to rotate in and out where Gloria and Brenda are sitting. But on the licensing side, I know that has been an issue too, is some people have left, in addition for the money, just the ability to work from home a little bit.
And the inflationary environment that we're in overall across the country has got to be affecting people.
Yeah,
So my question, I just want to ask, my question would be, is there a concern, as there are in many industries, that somebody might take a position as a meantime position until they find something that has a higher salary that's available to them? So we might see some transition.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, if you work for a state agency, especially a smaller one like what we are, you're going to be exactly that. You're going to be a stepping stone or a training ground. Either people will use you to step into something else, or the larger agencies will poach what you train up. That is just that we're a hunting ground for the bigger employers. That's just how it works.
But are we in a better position with BHAC than we were with independent licensing boards, because we can pool the resources and fill in, some of the gaps that we have more gaps than we would have anticipated at this point in time, but we've got some stability, to Dr. Taylor's question, to be able to make sure that some priorities are still being dealt with, whereas we wouldn't have had that opportunity previously without BHAC. Would that be correct?
You're in 100% or 1,000% better position than what you were with just Psych Board. Psych Board was the only one with true independent dedicated staff to that agency. I mean, had we lost half, 1 or 2 attorneys at Psych Board, well, that would have meant Patrick and John were gone. There, we wouldn't have had any lawyers at that point, which we were in that position a couple of times with Psych Board, and it was very difficult for me because then I had to take over both the GC and the ED roles. So yeah, I mean, you're in a much, much better position here. At least we've got other people to cover the priority 1, 2s, and 3s cases as they're coming in. Keep those flowing. The licensing staff, they're doing a really good job of cross training one another. So you've got ways to fill in there. So, I mean, yeah, we're in a lot better position. We've got a deeper bench to pull from. And that was honestly, that was one of Sunset's concerns it's their concern with every small agency that they review. They're like, you really don't have a very deep bench to pull from if you run into a personnel issue. And so with this setup, we're in a better position there. We're never going to be in the same level as a TDLR or medical board or nursing board, but we're in a much better position than what we were at psych board for something like this.
So it might be a misperception by the public or licensees who are waiting for applications or renewals or the complaint process, that it might be a misperception that all these vacancies are going to slow us back down to where we were maybe in January of 2020. We are in a better position right now to manage these ebbs and flows. And so while we're always asking for patience, we've got systems in place now, is what it sounds like, so that there shouldn't be a response burst in terms of fear that these open positions will take us right back to a standstill. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it would. Yeah, I would already be ringing the bell for you ringing the alarm if I thought something bad, because I'd want to be out on front of that and let everybody know, hey, you're fixing to see a hiccup here. And I mean, we may very well see a little bit of a hiccup on the enforcement side on LPC, but remember, we're in pretty good shape on the licensing side. The only thing we've got is the four vacancies that we just got, those positions, and then one that we lost as a result of I had to terminate an individual. So, but the good thing about here's kind of the good thing about vacancies. It does create a pathway, an upward pathway for people in the agency, and we do a lot of internal promotion. You'll see, or if you look at our personnel files, you'll see that a lot of stuff people start out as an admin, and then they move on up to something else.
Which I know we've seen on the psych board in the past. And so it's exciting to see, and it's also exciting to have some consistency with staff who move up. So I think that's an important point to make. And I think it's a tribute to leadership as well as the good hiring decisions.
Let me tell you one other thing that's good about your staff. And I don't know that I've ever told y'all this, but there's a lot of people here that don't have to be here, that have chosen to work for y'all. They could go. I know for a fact that some of them have had better offers at other agencies, but because of the culture and working for this agency in particular, they have voluntarily chosen to stay here and make less money. Now that's a kind of loyalty that you can't buy it, but you damn well better reward it when the time comes, when you're able to do it. Because those are the ones that will get you over the hump and drag you through the swamp whenever you're really stuck in something. And so I'm not going to name names or anything on this call, but I'll be happy to share those names with the leadership if y'all want to email or call me afterwards, because you've got a few that they're here, they stayed, and they did not have to stay through the thick and the thin, but they're here. So you've got a set of core staff that are really dedicated to your mission here.
Thank you. Please thank them for us.
We'll do it. Okay. Let's see. I got off on my inspirational speech there. Now I lost track of where I am. Unless there are any questions on the licensing processing stuff or the licensing efficiency, I'll move on. The next thing is the update on the enforcement functions. Let me pull that information up for y'all. You know, the reason I'm not sitting down by Gloria is because I have 4 screens that I run this meeting off of. That, and I've got some kind of funky respiratory illness going on right now, so she didn't want to sit next to me. But this is can y'all see this quarterly report here? Have I got it? Okay. This is your 4th quarter status report, the one that Alfonso typically prepares for you. You can see your number of pending complaints is down to 634, and you can see the breakdown per board here. The one anomaly I would point out is this 128 here. I'm not sure why we had such a significant uptick there. We went from all the way from 111 down to 86. Now we're back up to 128. We have no control over that. It's just kind of it's just an interesting thing to watch. Oftentimes different parts of society will drive that. You know, I remember at Psych Board when Me Too hit, we had a pretty significant uptick in the number of sexual impropriety complaints we started getting. So I don't know if something else is going on in society, that, you know, some social trend I'm not aware of that might be driving that. So I don't know if anybody's got any ideas, might pitch it out there. The number of priority 1 and priority 2 complaints that are pending are dropping, which is what we want to see. The priority 3. Yes, sir.
On those priority 1s, 2s, I guess 3s, is it possible, or is it a lot of work for you to disseminate which board those are attached to?
I think we can. I'll check with Alfonso, but I think we can do that.
Okay, I'd just be interested to know.
Okay. Let me see if I can work with him. We may have to kind of restructure how this looks, but I bet we could do it. Probably do it just like up here.
Hey,
Cases
Daryl, real quick, when we're looking at these pending cases, those are just pending and holdover on like priority 1, 2, 3. Do we have a breakdown of what the new complaints are?
No, I haven't. No, we don't have a breakdown on that.
Okay.
Let's see. You're talking about broken down between what was a holdover and what has come in since BHEC?
Yeah, that 128 number, that's just new things in the door. But the below the 128 number, 18, 57, 11, those are just pending. That's just
Correct.
You know,
That could be,
those can be filed whenever.
that could be old complaints. That could be stuff that was filed after BHEC came into being.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't want to give extra work. I'd be curious to know, like, to your point, when, you know, Me Too was really, you know, gaining steam in the news. You know, I think that it spurred a lot of people to. It's not that more impropriety was happening; it's that people felt empowered, and rightfully so, to speak about it. So I am curious when we see an uptick like that to know what drove that number.
Yeah. I'll sit down with Alfonso and we'll see if we can't see if there's some other way we can flesh that out a little bit more.
I don't want to give him more work, but if there's an easy way to say it was just, we saw this here, that would be good enough for me.
Okay.
But it would also be true, because we've seen it in the past, that some of these cases could have the same licensee involved as the person being complained about. Is that correct?
Say again, Dr. Fletcher?
Oh, it's multiple, what's the word? So like one licensee could have 5 complaints that are sexual misconduct, and that is counted as 5, not as 1. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, you could have multiple complaints about one incident of conduct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Daryl, on the pending priority 1 cases, the imminent physical harm, will we start to see, have you knocked out all the big ones and now we're just have those that are going to SOA? Is that what the slowdown is going to be in the priority 1 cases at this point?
The priority 1 cases, that is going, what happens is when a case comes in, the investigator looks at it and they look at the most serious allegation in the complaint. And so whatever that most serious is, that's what it gets labeled as. So right now you've got 18 with that. That really doesn't, the 18 doesn't tell you how many that you have that have that are set to go to SOA or how many are set for an ISC. It doesn't tell you where they're at in the process. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, I was wondering if, like last quarter we had 19, now we have 18. We've seen significant drops and changes in the other categories. And so I was just curious if this category, why we did not see as big a movement in it, since they are priority 1 cases.
That may be the norm that you see. As BHEC progresses, we may start to develop where the norms are going to be, because I know eventually there's going to be a norm of how many complaints you have pending just by virtue of how many we can churn out versus what comes in. And that may be kind of where it's settling out at. I don't yet know. We'll have to get a little bit more behind us.
Thank you.
Patrick, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think adding to the puzzle on this is some of this, and speaking with Alfonso, working through these, is they've gone through and classified some of these as older cases were prioritized differently under HHSC. And so some of the numbers are resolved cases and some of them are recategorizing them or reprioritizing them because they were categorized differently. So sometimes the numbers are changing because of those as well, I guess, to give a clearer picture of it.
I would think that if we saw a concern, back to the number of new complaints, it would be easy to look at how many of those are duplicated and how many of those are unduplicated. Unique individuals complained about rather than unique complaints. I don't see it as a need right now. And for the benefit of the public, since I have a horrible time with acronyms, SOAH is State Office of
Administrative hearings. That's the agency that operates like a bench trial or that, a judge that tries the case. You don't get a jury trial, you get a bench trial before another state agency. You can see the cases resolved dropped a little, dropped quite a bit there, but again, that's not indicative of a problem. That's just the process kind of working out. We've also dropped significantly the number of complaints that are pending. So you're going to see, decreases in the rest of these numbers as well. Number of agreed orders signed is still holding pretty steady at 50. I think that number will start to go down eventually as well. One of the things I learned when I've been given a lot of presentations lately, and I always like to give the folks when I do presentations, I always like to do statistics for them and just let them know, because I think there's this perception that, hey, the board's the boogeyman, they're out there to get my license. And so I always like to share with them, what's the statistical likelihood that you're going to get a complaint filed, and what's the likelihood that you're going to have a sanction entered against you. The statistical likelihood is like less than 1%, that you're going to get a complaint filed against you. And of course, it's even much lower that you're going to have a sanction entered against you. But one of the things that I found, and this is a product of just us going through the backlog, it is not indicative of how things will norm out over time, is that of the complaints disposed of in fiscal year 21, I think 27, which was it, is right around a quarter resulted in some sort of disciplinary action. That's a lot. That's very high when you look at, I know like Psych Board's historical record, that's pretty high. But again, the reason I'm not worried about that, or that I'm not sounding off alarms or anything that we're doing something wrong, or that the licensee population is not paying attention to the law, is because we're talking about well over a decade's worth of complaints that we're now combing through. So it's going to skew the numbers. So I don't see anything here that causes me concern right now, given the backlog we're going through. You can see, I know the fiscal year 2009 and 2010 complaints are, well, technically they're accurate, but we've got one order that's going to be going to the LPC board at its next meeting that's going to clear up all but, I think, one of the 2009 ones will be left. And I think that one's going to have to be tried over. So, but the rest of those, I know 2 from 09 and 1 from 2010 or something like that, will be cleared up. So we're chewing away at that. So that's all I've got there. See if I can bring. Here are the total. Okay, yeah, here's that percentage I was talking about earlier, the 27%. Here are the totals that Alfonso does for me every year, just to give you some idea of what happened over the course of the year. 32 sexual misconducts. Again, that would look bad if we were just talking about a single year, but you've actually compressed over a decade's worth of complaint investigations into 1 year there. So that's I think going to be fairly high compared to what you're going to see norm out over time.
Public ISC is informal settlement conference.
Yes, informal settlement conference, correct. Okay, now one of the things that we were tasked with at the last meeting was, I think Mr. Francis wanted us to come up with ways that we could reduce the overall complaint average processing time. One of the steps we've taken is, and this is something we suffered from at Psych Board, and I don't know that the HHSC agencies had it as well. We really didn't have, we've got priority classifications for complaints 1, 2, 3, and 4, but within what we didn't have was we've got like, I don't know, what is that, 13, 20 something categories of complaints. What we never had was kind of a very standardized classification, set of complaints. And then we did not have a standardized set of definitions. And here's why that's important to have. When you're training staff, it's good to have a standardized set of definitions so that they know, oh, this is a criminal history complaint, or this is a fraud, deceit, and bribery. If you don't have that standardized set of definitions, it may get misclassified and you end up with bad data. So what I did is Tim Spear, he worked on this, came up with, looked between what Psych Board used and what HHSC was using, came up with these different classifications for the types of complaints. And then he created definitions to go with them so that staff will have a very standardized set that they can choose from. So that's one of the steps we're taking. Also in your meeting materials, I came up with this cheat sheet here. What the important thing that I want to, I'm not going to go over it all. You guys have already read it, but the important thing that I want to point out to y'all and the public is that when you take away, when you take out the old complaints, the backlog complaints, and you just look at the complaints that are coming in under BHEC, we're resolving those things in like between 120 and 127 days. That's good. I mean, that's very good. So that's better than what we were doing. I think that's better than what we were doing at Psych Board whenever we were just the Psych Board. And it's certainly better than what was happening over at HHSC, where you had those year-long or year-plus long complaints. So what I want y'all to take away is this is what I think it's going. Once we get clear of the backlog, this is kind of what I think it's going to look like on the enforcement side. Assuming we have adequate, assuming we can keep staffed at near full or full capacity. Now, if you don't have that, you're going to come off of that a little bit, because we were almost at full capacity when these numbers, were generated, but we weren't quite at full, but close. So, but that ought to give you a pretty good idea where we're going to land once we get through the backlog of complaints. So I don't want anybody, you got to take that, that average, that 600 and something days average complaint resolution. You got to take that stuff, you got to look at it relatively speaking. So don't fret about those high numbers, because I think this is where we're going to end up. Any questions about any of that? All right. Agreed orders and dismissals. I won't go over that. I'll let y'all look over those. There's really nothing to do there unless y'all have any questions. SciPAC, Patrick, do you have an update on that you want to give them?
Yeah, if you look at the handout, there's a newsletter, the October one from SciPAC in 3F in your board packet. And SciPAC,
Patrick, I don't know that they have that. I don't have that.
Oh, it's in the I thought it was in the materials, but I can share screen if that would help.
Can you just, either that or email it to them.
Yeah, I can just tell them, I can email it to them later, but
Give them the highlights here.
Briefly, we met August 5th, and there's some new rules that SciPAC have proposed for comment. They also admitted Alabama, Kentucky, and Minnesota into SciPAC. Currently, there are 27 states that have enacted legislation to join, and 22 have been officially entered into the compact. The other new ones that entered this year were Alabama, District of Columbia, I think I said Kentucky previously, Maryland, Minnesota, Ohio, and Tennessee. And they're looking to add Kansas, Maine, and New Jersey have enacted legislation. They're hoping to add soon. The commission meets again in November for its annual meeting. And as of October, or the end of September, for Texas, there are 528 APITs, which are authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology, and 28 TAPs, which is the temporary authority to practice telepsychology, issued for Texas alone. And it's the state with the highest numbers, but they have the numbers for all the other states as well. There are over 4,000, about 4,500, or I'm sorry, about 4,000 APITs issued so far and 150 TAPs issued so far. So that's generally what they've gone through. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. But the newsletter is real good, and I'll try to send that out as well.
Yeah, and you know, I think Arkansas also adopted SciPAC. Now they haven't been admitted yet because Arkansas put some kind of funky regulation in there that said the medical board, I think, has to sign off on, I don't know, something.
Yeah, they asked them to the medical board to write a rule or something. The issue is each state needs to enact the exact same statutory language. And so part of the review process the SciPAC does is if they don't enact the same language, they look to see if there's any substantial differences. And if there are, then they may have to send it back to the state to maybe not admit them or not.
Yeah.
I do have a question, Patrick. We've spoken openly in an open forum about states that appear to be somewhat delayed in their ability to embrace this. And wouldn't New York be one of them? I mean, California is one of them, correct?
California has not adopted it. My understanding is they've reached out to try for them to join, but they have not joined, and New York has not joined, to my understanding as well. And I don't believe they have any pending legislation in either state to join. So they're not necessarily on the watch list right now.
Right. So would those two states be the major ones who are outliers to embrace this, or are there any other states that may be delayed in their ability to see the positive aspects of this?
Florida.
Yeah.
Florida?
Florida. I can tell you why on Florida. I can shed a little bit of light there. I've spoken with ASPPB on this. Florida has, kind of like Arizona, they have created a very wide lane for coming into the state, a very wide open lane for coming into the state practicing. And so Florida views it as, well, if we've created such an easy way to get licensed in Florida, why do we need to do the compact? The problem with that line of thinking, or I view it as a problem, is it doesn't help your citizens go elsewhere. It doesn't help your folks with their mobility outward. So I think I was talking to the MFT board the other day about this, and if you're a Floridian, it's easy to get, or if you're coming into Florida, it's easy to get licensed there. If you're a Floridian licensed there, it doesn't help you any. That large expressway in doesn't help you. So that's one of the major drawbacks to the going it your own route of, licensure by endorsement routes, is you don't have that same mobility outward. Now I'll tell you, on California, I guess I'll let y'all know. I was actually asked to give input by the California board. When they had their hearing on this, they invited me to give testimony on my experience with SciPAC. So I did. I gave a very positive view of it. And I recommended that they seriously consider doing it because it's added, I forget how many hundreds, if not 1,000, or more providers that can now deliver services here in Texas. So it's a way to grow the number of providers available for your citizens faster than what you can churn out yourself as a licensing board, or faster than what you're even on your degree programs can churn out. They didn't like that idea. And I think their problem is because SciPAC, the current rules, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, is it statutory, or is it a rule of SciPAC that you have to come from an APA accredited program?
It's part of the ASPPB e-passport, and that's in the statutorily, it requires an e-passport, and the e-passport requirements are set by ASPPB, and that contains the APA requirement.
So it's not
What's that
statutory.
acronym?
It's
ASPPB, what's that?
Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. So that's one of the reasons that California has struggled, or that is kind of, opposed joining SciPAC. I don't know if that will ever change. I don't know if that's more of a pretext argument also. I'm just not sure what they're doing now. New York, I mean, I'm sorry for all the New Yorkers listening, but New York is New York. And I can't say that they're always reasonable. We always are, but I can't say that they're always reasonable. And that's not just Texas talking. You can talk to any jurisdiction outside of New York, and they will probably all back me up on that.
Daryl, I had a quick question to kind of piggyback on the SciPAC. How are complaints handled if you have a practitioner that's coming into Texas and does harm to a Texas citizen? Where does that complaint fall?
Patrick, you want to take that?
Yeah, so there's language and rules, and that's part of what some of the rules that have been adopted and are being also ironed out there. But both jurisdictions would coordinate and cooperate with an investigation. And so they can both do that. Now, there's a home state licensure, and that's the one where they would most likely get their license yanked away. But the way that it's set up is they'll lose the SciPAC privileges, not when there's a final determination on discipline, but when there's probable cause determined. So either of the two jurisdictions can do the investigation and then find that there's more than just a baseless complaint, and they can lose that ability to practice interjurisdictionally much faster because their regulations are different.
Okay. If that occurs, will we have the ability to understand when we're looking at our BHEC numbers, if these numbers are originating with Texas licensure or if these are cross-state complaints? Will we be able to differentiate that out so we can look and see how many practitioners coming from out of state would be complaints that would fall with our numbers? In other words, how are we going to look at how we look at that data to separate it?
I don't know if Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if we actually have something in the database to track that currently. It's just based on complaints, but we don't parse it out by if it's a telepsychology, under SciPAC or not. So I think the short answer to your question is no. Right now, I don't know that we do.
I'd like for us to be able to look at that possibility as more and more licenses go toward either mobility or PAC, to where we all of a sudden it doesn't look like that we're having an implosion of some sort, or we can't keep on top of it. I'd like to be able to have this tracking to where we know if it's out-of-state licensures or in-state licensures for us to be looking at.
My guess is that the SciPAC commission itself can probably run a report and provide the member boards with something showing, hey, here's how many folks got in trouble in Texas. My guess is that Patrick, can you check with Janet, ASPPB, and see if there's some way that they can track that for us so that we don't have to build it into our database?
Yeah. I want the ability for mobility, obviously. I just want to make sure that it doesn't impact us with the state legislature or any kind of numbers at all. Thank you.
And then I had two very brief questions. I know I have started on documents where I might list my Texas license, both the LSSP as well as my psychology license number. I'm putting mobility number, SciPAC mobility number under my signature line now. And that has caused attorneys and other professionals to ask questions about that, which I see as an opportunity to talk about what that is, but also as an opportunity to make sure that people understand when I am practicing, I'm physically in Texas, but somebody's in another state, that is the where I've received permission to be able to do that. There's still, as we would expect, a lot of misinformation about what you can and cannot do. If you have a mobility number and you're one of the 28 or 528 in Texas right now, but it's been very favorable. It's easy to explain. It's a way to highlight that, and it's not required, but I think it'll go a long way for the public relations and the support of it. The other thing I have a question for you, Patrick, is that I appreciate that ASPPB and SciPAC and all of that is related to psychology within the United States. What's the discussion at the meeting level where you're attending about the opportunity for when people are outside of the United States, in Mexico or Canada, being able to receive services from someone that has a mobility number?
Yeah, so in order to do that, SciPAC can't admit like Canadian provinces. The United States would need a treaty with that other country. So right now we have to have each state enact legislation. And once they have matching legislation, they can join SciPAC. But if it goes outside the US, the United States Congress will have to pass a treaty or ratify a treaty that the other country will ratify that has the same language to join that. So I think the likelihood of that happening is extremely low, but I guess it's not impossible.
Because I do, that's been a challenge because during the pandemic, people could not enter the United States who were in Canada or quarantined, who needed services or were in Mexico and unable to travel back. And so I just was curious.
Yeah, they can't join SciPAC, but there's other ways that, they could get licensed here or temporary licensed here to deliver services if they were in another country. Like Canadians will sometimes apply for temporary licensure or full licensure so that they can deliver services here. They just don't have the SciPAC route to take, unfortunately.
When you say temporary, you're talking about psychology only. I don't want to give the
Right.
impression
Psychology,
the other programs don't have that same capability. I will tell you, Dr. Fletcher, one thing that we used to have reciprocity agreements. Texas used to be a member of several reciprocity agreements. One of the problems, it's probably one of those deals where we were never going to get in trouble because it didn't harm anything with the U.S. government. But I'm not sure. We had a reciprocity agreement with Manitoba and Ontario. I don't know how you can do that as a state, how you could enter into a reciprocity agreement with a foreign province, but we did it. If I could get away with it with Mexico, I'd probably do it. Just because we have a lot of cross-border traffic. I've been getting a lot of questions about people, from Juarez to El Paso. I get a lot of those questions, and I'm like, you're going to have to contact the Mexican authorities. I don't know what to tell you. And of course, their licensing scheme is very different from ours, so it's not an easy thing to tackle. But that's one of the major hangups there. Why? Otherwise, I'd probably just explore doing it, working out something with each individual Mexican province on our border, or with Canada. Anything else on SciPAC? Okay. The next thing, and I'm going to have to turn this one over to Chair Canseco, Mr. Francis, and Mr. Blemowitz, is the report on the 3-member travel policy work group. I'll have to turn that over to y'all and let y'all talk about where you're at.
Thank you. We did, the 3 of us have met, and I'll let one of the other members speak. George, John?
George, you want to take it? Well, I can say we are working through it. We've had robust discussion. I don't mind saying this in an open meeting. I mean, there have been agencies in the news in the past that due to travel and how they've done things for non-official meetings, pejoratively called, the pejorative of them is junkets. And I want to be sure that we're being good custodians of the state's and taxpayers' money. The discussion generally revolves around, obviously for official meetings, that money is allocated, it's budgeted. We are going to have some challenges with our budget with SOA coming up, with some technicalities and how the law was written. Daryl, can you flesh that out real quick? I understand it, but I don't understand it well enough to teach it. Can you explain that nugget real quick for us?
Sure. When an agency, SOA is tasked with hearing all agency complaints. If it's a contested complaint, it has to go to SOA. SOA is funded primarily in 2 ways. One, either the legislature gives them the money to handle all the complaints sent over by a list of agencies, or 2, if you're not in that list, you have to pay. Y'all excuse me for just a second. Or if you're not on that list, then you have to pay an hourly basis. Now, what happened was the psych board used to be on SOA's list. And when we got the 2022, when we got BHEC's budget, They took the psychology board out of SOA's bill pattern, but they forgot to put BHEC in, and it was a straight up honest oops. None of us caught it. It wasn't a nefarious thing or anything like that. We just missed it. Well, what that means is now SOA doesn't get money to pay for our complaints, so we have to pay on an hourly basis, and it's $150 an hour, statutorily set, or it's set by regulation somewhere. And I mean, that's the end of that discussion. We have to pay it. Now, the problem is we did not budget for that. And so you're talking about thousands of dollars, just to give folks, the public some perspective here. For the month of September, we spent $4 grand at SOA, and we didn't even try anything over there. It was just mediations and some hearings and some, I mean, anytime they pick up a pen to write something for us, we get billed for it. So it's just like if you ever gotten a bill from a lawyer, I'm going to bill you in 6-minute increments. So
6 minutes.
that's what I billed at.
So, Daryl, thank you for that. So that doesn't have a whole lot to do with travel, but it does in the fact that we've got a budget, that some money that we need to find in the budget somewhere. Travel being as visible as it is something we want to be sensitive to when we're going to do things that are not necessarily an official meeting, an official function of the board. I recognize, and I think we all recognize that serving on BHEC and our respective boards is a sacrifice. You know, when it comes to travel, though, for things that are not specific to this board, with other industry, with the other stakeholder meetings and whatnot, it is important. But we're going to have to be sensitive and respectful of our budget constraints for the foreseeable future. And we're working on an official, what am I looking for? The official filter of how we're gonna do that. But that's, I feel like I've probably conveyed the general sense of the committee. We're working through the details, though, and I would defer to my other committee members if I've misstated anything.
No, I don't know that you've misstated anything, John. I think one of the other considerations that we looked at was, as John discussed the budget, where would the money come from? And as we heard from Executive Director Spinks earlier, one of the avenues that we have is that with the hiring issues that occur, we will always have some vacancies. And because of those vacancies, it means that we won't ever fully use the budget. Now, obviously, we've got SOA to pay for that will take up some of that, but there is the possibility that the vacancies that we experience throughout the course of the year might be able to fund some of that travel. And that's one of the other things that we'll look at to see. But we did talk about some of the trips that occur are outreach to make sure that the citizens know what the boards effectively and efficiently do, right? The more education we can provide them, the better we serve our constituencies. And that's what we're tasked with. And so those were some of the items that we discussed. But as John so eloquently put it, we're going to come back to this body with a proposed recommendation of what it should look like. And right now it's been an ad hoc basis, which seems to have worked out pretty well.
Right, that's what I was going to say next. We've been talking about this as the requests come through, and we're being very, very careful. I think it's important for the public to know that a new budget can't be worked until the next legislative session. So for now, ad hoc decisions right through the committee is what's going to have to take place. That will be based and come back to staff in the sense that we'll be asking, how are we performing on budget and maybe what's projected for the next quarter before a decision is made. So several of you took a trip and paid for it yourselves, and we thank you for that because it's important to get word out, and I know that it's associated with your professions, but that won't always be the case. So now we ask you and the public to bear with us. John, did you?
Well, yeah, I was going to add on one thing to what George said in terms of being available and making sure that different constituencies around the state know what we're doing. You know, through COVID, we've all had to do these board meetings virtually. In our personal lives and our business lives, we've had to figure out how to do things remotely and not in person as well. I think I speak for the entire board in this, is that we are available. If anybody has, you know, anything that they want to talk about, I've made myself available to whoever wants to talk. So, you know, if we can't travel there, it is still important for us to have that dialogue, and we are open to that anytime with any constituency.
Thank you, Jim. Any other remarks or concerns? Okay, so where are we on H?
Yeah, we're moving on to H then.
Mhm.
So this was something I brought up last time. You know, one of the things I know I see it in the customer service survey results. I personally, I get the gripe that people have with, you know, being able to get through to somebody on the phone. I'll tell you this, I think it's gotten a lot better since we have 2 receptionists. I don't think it's nearly as bad as it once was when we only had 1 receptionist. But I still get it that, you know, if you're stuck in that hold queue or you want to talk to somebody, I know that's better than talking to a machine or trying to read through the website. I get that. But one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting is y'all wanted us to go back and kind of study and see what was the nature of the phone calls we were getting to see if we couldn't tailor the website or tailor our approach to it. So Tim did that. Tim put together, he kind of put together a set of questions here. Let me share it with you. These are the categories or the buckets of phone calls that we put together. And this was when we started in September. You know, I'll let y'all read it. You can kind of read for yourself there. The other is just anything that doesn't fall into one of these categories here. Now, what we found was, or what Tim found was, when he started kind of digging down on the others to see, well, maybe we need to add more buckets if we're getting a whole bunch of, you know, other calls pertaining to X in the other category. The problem was every time we tried to create another bucket, you know, receptionists would tell us, hey, we're getting these phone calls. And we started tracking it. We would only get like 1 or 2 of those phone calls. It wasn't turning out to be a significant enough category to add to the sheet that you have here before you. That's September. Of course, you can see in October here. Here are the numbers for October. The application status check, you know, we're getting a lot of those. The fingerprinting. Now, the good thing about the fingerprinting is it will go away in about another year because we'll have everybody fingerprinted at that point. So I'm not too worried about the fingerprinting component part of it because that's going to go away in a year. But this is what we found. I don't know that it.
Carol, real quick, do you mind if I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
What are they complaining about? Because I hear a lot of complaints about it as well. I'm not up until April, so I haven't done it yet. But like, why is it so confusing? Why are so many people having a hard time with it?
Talking about the fingerprinting?
Yeah.
I think probably one of the biggest things is people are not reading those postcard renewal reminders that we send out. And also, I don't think people are updating their address so that stuff gets to them. You folks, you have to, I mean, it's by law, you have to keep your address up to date with the agency. The address of your address of record with us is what we use to send all official correspondence.
Well, like, for example, I had an employee that did the fingerprinting, went to where she was told to go, did it, and like the company never sent it in.
Identigo didn't send it in?
Yeah, Identigo. Yeah, they never sent it into the board. The board said they never got it. She had to like go back and do it all over again and pay for it again. So I was just curious, like, are there other problems outside of the people just not getting it and not knowing about it? I mean, like, are there actual logistical issues
the only thing I ever hear about is, you know, I didn't get notice of it, which we go through a lot of pains to make sure you get notice of it. I get people that will sometimes complain. I had to deal with one the other day with a legislator who they said, well, I don't have anything near me. They were trying to say that there wasn't an office within 2 states. I looked them up. There was one 20 miles from them. So they're not looking they're not paying careful attention whenever they go to look up where the office is. And then a lot of people are glossing over the fact that if you're, say, for example, you're overseas, you can actually mail in a hard copy, the fingerprint card itself. If you can't get to a place that will take a digital scan of your fingerprints, you still have the option of mailing in the hard copy. So, you know, I get those every now and then, but the vast majority of gripes and complaints that I get are, I didn't get notice of it. And you guys are just now telling me when I get this email. And I'm like, well, you know, is your address up to date? Did you read the postcard? There are several people I've dealt with, and I'm like, you didn't read it.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a myriad of complaints that we could just do a better job educating people on. But it just sounds like it's just going to run its course. So that sounds.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what else to do to educate people, because we put the postcard out. I send an email out. We have something on the website about it, and it's in the rule, and everybody's charged with knowledge of that rule. So I don't know what else to do to educate folks about it. I mean, I can send. Part of the problem, though, when you send mass emails out, is sometimes it puts people in a panic, and then it causes more of a problem, because people are like, well, oh my gosh, did I do that? I seem to recall doing it, but I don't remember specific. And so now I'm dealing with kind of a flood of emails asking about, well, does that apply to me? When can I do it? And I've just made my life more miserable. So it's kind of it's a catch-22 there.
Well, and it slows staff down on the progress they're making as well.
Yes, yeah.
So there's got to be joint accountability between our stakeholders and our staff, and I think we've done that.
There was one thing just said though about the potential that the vendor did not send it, because the process is you go get fingerprinted, vendor sends it to the agency, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and if the vendor didn't send it, like if there's some disconnect there, that's truly not acceptable. I totally get it with the communication piece. I actually had to get fingerprinted for something else with the FAA recently, and I actually did the hard copy. I actually got fingerprinted at an airport law enforcement office, and that's way more cumbersome, and there's way more opportunities to foul up that process. But when we're relying on a vendor, that's kind of what they're. I mean, if it's kind of what they're there for, and so I hope that's if that's exactly what happened, I hope that's isolated, but and not a bigger issue.
We can usually tell if it is legitimately a vendor problem, or if it's something that the applicant, or licensee didn't do correctly, because we can oftentimes ask them, show me your receipt. And that will tell us what code was used, because we've had instances of people supplying the vendor with the wrong code, or they'll just go get it as a self-report. Well, you can't do that. You have to use that special code that we give you,
right?
Because that's what goes to the FBI and DPS, and then our fingerprinting folks can log in and find you in our what's called our subscription list.
Okay,
Tim, you got your hand up.
Sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo what you were saying there at the end. One of the things that we hear a lot is, given the nature of these professions, they will have dealings with the court, et cetera, and they will have already done a fingerprinting for another agency, and are under the impression that all state agencies have access to their fingerprint records at that point. That is not the case. Every fingerprinting has to be done for the specific agency. And so if you were printed for, whether it was Department of Family and Protective Services or Child Protective Services or something like that, we can't see that person's criminal history record. It has to be done with our specific service code, and it will be specific to us. It's very siloed for identity protection. So a lot of people are under the impression that they can just, that once they've been fingerprinted by a state agency, they're good for the entire state, but that's not the case.
Yeah, because hypothetically, like even what I just had to do, like I don't know if it's the same vendor that we would have used. I know a lot of them serve a lot of different agencies. Even if I went and got fingerprinted for my thing, if I didn't check the code or drop down for for BHEC, it's there. It's just never going to go to you, and you're never going to have any visibility for it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably
Carol,
more likely.
I have one other brief question. I expected to see questions about the requirements for professional development related to human trafficking on the call list. It's probably in the other, but I know there were a lot of calls, a lot of misunderstanding about that requirement. Has that improved?
Tim, I haven't heard too many people complaining about that.
Okay.
One of the things that our customer service folks did with this survey is, if they were encountering something that they felt was a significant number of questions, they would write it down on the bottom of the sheet to let me know. And I don't recall seeing that even once.
Okay, that's good because there's been a lot of misunderstanding and people questioning how are we supposed to find it, what qualifies, all of that. So that sounds like that's a nice problem to take off the list. Thank you.
I suspect the state associations are probably helping us out there on that quite a bit. My guess is they've probably done a pretty good job of educating their membership. Hey guys, this is a new requirement. They may even, I haven't looked, they may have even developed their own training for it specific to their particular profession.
Well, I'll just give a shout out to TPA. I think they've done a really good job in their newsletter, and some of the things that have been enacted with the new executive director, I think have been very informative. It's not overwhelming. So it sounds like that's happening with many associations. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, I suspect we're benefiting from their efforts there.
Daryl, when I look at this, I have a couple questions, please. So this is 238 calls for October over a period of 32 hours. Is this just the physical calls that have come in, or is this the voicemails and the actual calls?
Tim?
This is just the physical calls that have come in. It doesn't deal with voicemails. So this is when our customer service staff is answering a phone call, answering a question. And it's for, as it notes on there, 8 to 12 Tuesdays and Thursdays. The customer service job is pretty high stress. So we wanted to see if we could get this information without adding too much to their plate as far as job duty is concerned.
So the question I would have, a couple things, please. One, when I look at this 32 hours, 238, roughly 7.5 calls per hour, that volume seems not as high as I thought it would have been. What is the comparative value of the calls that are going straight to voicemail that we have to go and respond to? Does this represent a third of the total number of calls? Does this represent half the calls that come into the agency? What's the volume of the voicemail? Because that sounds like it's the bulk of it, or is it?
Yep.
I don't know.
No, we actually don't have calls that go directly to voicemail. Everybody has to go through the switchboard, the customer service reps, and they're going to ask them, hey, what's the purpose of, what are you calling for? And so you don't have the option to just go directly to voicemail and then somebody listens to it and directs that voicemail later on. We tried that early on in BHEC and it was a disaster. It did not work. It way overloaded staff. So we had to do away with that. So every call that comes through actually gets answered by a warm body.
Additionally, keep in mind that these calls aren't necessarily just a 30-second call. Some of them can go on for 5, 10, 15, even 20 minutes. So the volume is not reflected in these numbers because there are multiple people on in the queue waiting to speak to somebody during this time.
I'm wondering if we lower the stress level by dispersing the calls. So instead of having 2 concentrated 4-hour blocks where we're getting 7.5 calls per hour, are we better off doing it, I don't know, Mondays through Thursdays and lowering that average to 3.5 calls per hour? So that
the calls are being taken all day. We only logged them from 8 to 12.
I'm not sure I understand, Tim.
Okay, so I only had them tracking their calls between 8 and 12. They were taking calls between 8 and 5.
Okay.
I didn't want them tasked with having to keep notes all day long every day. So I told Tim, pick days during the week and we'll only track these calls during X number of hours. That should give us a representative sample of what we're looking at.
Okay. Do we have an idea of what our call volume is on a weekly basis?
I do not.
Can't you project from this number?
I start saying you could probably just double this figure right here on a per day basis. Double that and multiply it times 5.
Okay. And so we're logging calls 8 to 12 Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we're physically taking calls with the 2 receptionists. We physically take calls 5 days a week, 8 to 12. I mean,
Yes,
8
sir.
to 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
About 2,400 a week.
You know, one of the things we looked at, George, and I discussed with staff was, my concern was when you look at the numbers, you're like, God dang, you know, you feel like we ought to be doing more calls, taking more calls, processing more through. But what we found was, is kind of like what Tim said, these calls are not 5-minute calls. They get on there and it's like, you know, it morphs into one subject is like a rabbit. It begets another rabbit. They call about one thing and then now we're helping them walk through the website or walk through renewal, something like that. And these calls are stretching out. So my concern was, I thought, well, do I have the receptionist press the caller and just say, look, what are you calling about, so that I can get you to whoever it is you need to get to? You do that and you come across as rude and insensitive and you get poor marks on customer service. Or do you do like we're doing now? You try to help the individual, you know, from start to finish at that level if you can. And then everybody in the call log is upset at you. I don't know what the right answer is, to be honest with you. That's kind of why I'm bringing all this to y'all. I don't know what to do with the resources that I have here.
Let
I
me
have-
share
I have-
some HHSC background with you as well. When I started at HHSC, all of our licensing staff answered calls all day long while they were processing. And so what happened was, of course, is that created a great big huge backlog in processing because we spent most of our time answering calls. We've kind of got to pick our poison. Do we want to be the best at processing applications and getting people licensed, or do we want to be the best at talking to people on the phone? If we had unlimited funds, then we could, you know, fund a huge call center and be able to handle all of this, and that would be great. But our budget is what our budget is, and we have to focus it in such a way as to meet our most important mission. And so that's where the rub is in this deal. And one of the things that we encountered at HHSC when we were answering phone calls, when we had the entire processing staff answering calls, is there was a tremendous amount of burnout and a tremendous amount of turnover. And so the comments that Director Spinks made earlier about our core staff who are sticking through us through thick and thin and getting us over the hump, et cetera, we were in danger of losing those at HHSC and lost many of them on a regular basis. But it's an unfortunate hurdle to deal with, having to both process and get the customer service satisfaction up to par at the same time. And that's what we're trying to do as best we can, given the resources we have.
Thank you. And I would imagine that any of us who've called a service provider, a television company, a hospital, you name it, you end up, by the time you get through the recordings, you're ticked. And the first human that answers the phone is, gets the brunt of your irritation or annoyance. And sometimes that can get really loud. I think I said this at the last meeting. Where I work, we have 6 people answering nonstop calls all day long, and we can't handle the volume of calls. And this is a small private dental clinic for underserved people. So you can imagine what's going on at the state level. I agree that this is not ideal. I wish we could afford 6 receptionists, but we can't. I see that, Daryl, that must be you that just brought up the discussion points. I think your message is so good that I actually printed that page so that I can use it at the clinic. I think that when we look at our stakeholders, I think someone would much prefer calling more than once and getting everybody on the phone. And I think 2,400 calls a week is very respectable. And I agree that it helps with staff retention. I also agree with you, George, it's not ideal. I'm sure that it's frustrating for others as well. What do you do? You said pick your poison. That was a really good metaphor.
Yeah, I want the public to know nobody here likes well, I'm going to speak for the council and definitely staff, but nobody here likes the situation we're in that we're unable to respond to all the phone calls. It stinks. I get that. It's just, what is the solution to it? I mean, saying it stinks doesn't help me. I'll agree with you if you say it stinks. I've got to have a solution to it. And just generic statements of make it better, that doesn't help me any. And I'm really speaking to the public now. So I mean, if I'm more than willing to entertain any kind of solutions or options anybody has. You know, one of the things we looked at doing was, well, okay, what if we create a phone tree where when somebody calls in and they're like, I got a question about social work application, we can patch them straight through to a voicemail set up uniquely for that program. We're going to get it. I'm afraid after visiting with staff, we're going to get into the exact same problem we had when we had the general voicemail box originally. And it just became swamped with people, you know, calling all the time, hoping to be the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. So I just don't think that's going to be a workable solution on this. My only other thing that I want the council to, I'm not saying you have to decide on it right now, but put it in the back of your mind. Is this something where we need to ask for additional staffing under the next LAR request? Now, the bad thing about that is, and the state associations will need to be thinking about this, is that costs money, which means it increases fees. So you need to be thinking about how you know, if that is a solution we want to go for. But anyway.
So Daryl, one of the thoughts in asking for the request to Pareto out, what are the most common questions, is so that we can triage them, right? So if you go back to the chart real quickly, please.
Types of phone calls received.
You want September or October, George?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Thank you for asking. So here, how do I apply application status check and fingerprinting are the top three. So if those are the top three, what can we do to prepare so when people call, we can answer those questions, the most common questions quickly, or the questions that are the fastest we can answer, and then have a strategy how to route or what to do with the other questions. It's all about creating a strategy of how to get through as many questions as quickly as possible. I agree with you. There's fundamentally no way that if we're doing 2,400 calls a month with two people, I think that's probably, it's not realistic, right? So how do you get the best strategy to be able to answer the most efficiently as possible? So what does that mean? What type of aids or what type of information or frequently answered question sheets can we get to those receptionists so that when they get questions that apply to whatever the top three areas are, they can process those the fastest so they can move on to other areas, or which are the questions we know they should not be answering and that they should be routed to the right place. The whole thing here is, how do we get to a strategy of how to reach, how to track and route each category of calls? That's the point of the exercise.
Okay.
Can I chime in right to depend on that? Because I think George asked, I think in a lot of ways, the right question. But I mean, you've got 1 out of 5 phone calls is asking about application status check. I believe it's on the website. It's 1 click away off the homepage. About, you guys have a spreadsheet that has the like with the application time, like what if you submitted on such and such date, we're processing applications from this date. Is that right, Daryl?
Yes. Yeah, we do.
The only thing, I mean, improvement there is that if that's on the footer of the homepage, frankly, if you're getting 1 out of 5 phone calls on that, that's kind of number 1 on this list in terms of the buckets. The only thing I could suggest is maybe that lives on the homepage, and maybe we start directing people there and just keeping it super up to date. And I mean, that's how the real estate commission does that. They update it like to the day, essentially, because it matters for like brokerage renewals for the end of the month. When we get behind on something and need it in, you better have gotten it in on time, because they may not, if you apply like early in the month and you've left it to the last month, you may not get it approved by the end of the month. I had a tax stamp with the ATF once. It was the same way. It just said we're doing applications from such and such date. If you were before that date, or if you're after that date, you knew how far back in line you were essentially.
I think the problem with let me start with the most problematic, the application status check. I don't know, the receptionists really aren't equipped to answer that question. That's going to be a question that needs to go to the L&P that's handling that application. And the problem with putting all those through and requiring them to answer it is it's going to negatively impact your numbers on how you process applications. So that's one of the reasons why we don't like to respond to phone calls and emails about status checks within the first 6 weeks of submitting that application, is because it takes you off mission of actually processing the application. So I don't know what the solution there is. Now on the how to apply, maybe we can look at trying to see if there's a better way to direct people to like the application checklist. Tim and I, let me I'll sit down with Tim and some of the licensing staff and see if there's something we can do there. The fingerprinting, Tim's got a really good, we have a good web page that describes what that process is like. Now the hang up on that web page, and I will admit this, is we don't have a link to the form, so that if somebody doesn't have the form, they realize, oh crud, I got to go get that fingerprint, but then they don't have the actual form you need to go to Identigo. The problem is I can't put that link publicly, because that's why I got DPS in trouble with the FBI at Psych Board for doing that. The feds don't want that form public for some reason. So I can't make that public, which means you're required to have some kind of contact or interaction. But that's also why when people have fingerprinting questions and they go to us on the Contact Us web form, that email goes directly to our fingerprinting person. It doesn't go to anybody else. I have it set to go directly to her so that she can respond to it as quickly as possible. There's no middleman involved there. So I'm not sure what else to do on the fingerprinting part. The one that I think we may be able to do a little bit on is that how do I apply? Well, I'll sit down and visit with staff on that one and see if we can't tighten it up a little bit there.
Any other discussion? Those are good ideas. Thank you, everybody.
The next item is going to be the review of the Texas-specific draft workforce study that myself and a couple of stakeholders have worked on. Let me tell you kind of my goal here is, I personally think we need to be doing a workforce study, because I don't think the information we're asking here is gathered in any other tool that's being used out there, or at least that's accessible to us. The stuff that the state gathers through the minimum data set, some of that's encompassed here, but this goes far beyond what's in the minimum data set. So what I would like to do is, if y'all are okay with it, at this point, I'm not asking you to pass judgment on the draft itself. I just want y'all to give me permission to share this with the state associations. Let's get their feedback on it. If there's any changes we need to make, let's get that done. Then I want to bring it back to y'all, kind of get your judgment on it. And then once y'all are okay with it, we can put it out for public comment to get any kind of public comment on it. Then we'll launch it. If that sounds like an okay plan with y'all. I just don't want to get y'all bogged down in it right now at this chance, or at this moment.
Sounds good. Any objections?
Yeah, I don't need a formal vote. I just need to know if anybody's got an objection to it, really.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I will make that happen then. And I'll reach out to all the state associations, and I'll set up meetings with them. The next item is the potential impact for the Hunter versus U.S. Department of Education case out of Oregon. The only reason I put this in there is, I've told y'all before, I like to keep y'all apprised of any kind of major litigation or, any kind of major legislative thing going on in the country. The way I think this could impact us is if this challenge is successful and they are able to knock out private religious institutions from receiving federal funding, that could decrease the number of people coming out of degree programs and thereby decrease the number of providers we're we're available to license per year. That's the only reason I put this in here. It's not really a fight that involves us, but it could, create a bottleneck or a choke in the number of people that are eligible to even come to us to apply for a license.
What is the gist of the complaint?
It's a challenge to private religious institutions like Baylor from receiving federal student aid based upon religious requirements they have in their charter documents and student body requirements. So they're basically saying you can't do that as a religious institution if you're going to receive federal funding. And so if universities say, well, we're not altering from our religious mission, then they're out of receiving federal funding if this lawsuit prevails. And that's going to cut down on the number of providers that they're pumping out every year. So
in Oregon, is this place originally?
yes, ma'am, it's in Oregon. Yeah. So that's the only reason I'm providing it to y'all. Just kind of give you a heads up. I'll watch it. If anything develops, I'll let you know. The only other thing, I guess there's two other things here. The family leave pool language that we'll add to the personnel manual, that'll be dependent upon whether y'all propose the corresponding rule later on. So there's not really much to discuss there. And then the last thing I have under my report is I wanted to see how y'all felt about giving me kind of blanket authority that if in the event an opportunity comes up to serve on committees, task force, or boards for things like ASPPB, ASWB, I forget what the counseling equivalent is, or AMFTRB, anything like that. I would like to have that authority to do that, so long as it doesn't cost us anything travel wise. I know I had that authority at Psych Board. I had requested that the board give me permission for that, and they did so. I think it's I think it's a good opportunity to kind of spread our way of doing business. And so I would like permission to do that, but I didn't want to do it. What brought this up was there was a board position that had come open for ASPPB board, and I had thought about throwing my hat in the ring for that, but then I got to thinking, well, you haven't run that by your boss yet, so you better run it by them before you jump on anything like that.
Why wouldn't your travel be covered? Isn't that part of your professional responsibilities here?
Well, yeah, but with our budget situation right now, I'm not going to incur any kind of travel. And most of this type of stuff, like I'm on the social work compact task force. I had to go to DC. They covered that. I did that without asking really for permission from y'all. I probably shouldn't have, but I did it. And now I guess I'm asking for forgiveness. But this is the kind of, I'd kind of like a blank check on doing this kind of stuff, as long as I use good judgment and don't get us in a financial pickle, by doing it.
I think the idea that we're spreading the Texas, I think we do things pretty well around here. I think a lot of other states have looked to us for what did Texas do on this? And when these interstate things are being drafted and discussed, I think it's good to have a seat at the table. It's an old political adage: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And if there's opportunities for Mr. Spinks to be at the table, spreading the gospel of the Texas way of doing things, I think that's a good thing for the state. I think that's a good thing for our country.
I don't disagree with that at all. I guess what I would ask Daryl is if you would just include the the quarterly expenditures, whatever the time frame is that matches up to our meetings, just include that as your report, just so that we continue our fiduciary responsibility of our roles that we're appointed to. I would be also fine with that.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I also think it also gives us access to information earlier, and also resources. So I'm 100% supportive of that, and hope that you do have that opportunity with ASPPB.
We need a motion to.
Yeah, I'd want to vote on that with that.
Make a motion.
That requirement.
Yeah.
Second.
And the motion is to, I'm assuming, approve the request for Daryl to be able to serve, for our executive member to serve on various roles or associations on which the council or its members, boards, whole membership are participating. Is that correct, Susan? And second is George. All in favor indicate by raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. I think the motion passed unanimously.
Good deal.
And scan
you.
as fast as your hands.
Dr. Taylor, what's the counseling equivalent of these boards? How can Daryl represent us?
I mean, there are several.
So Daryl, do you want to be part of several or just the highlights?
I'm thinking just the national board that's, we're a member of it, and I'm just ashamed to say I can't remember the name of it.
AAS.
I don't know. I cannot remember for the life of me.
Age-related
acronym.
cognitive impairment. And I'm not even a psychologist.
NBCC,
Just pick some letters, Daryl. Just pick some
That's it.
letters.
NBCC.
Sarah said it.
So
NBCC.
Daryl, we've given you blanket authorization to go find the National Counseling Board and participate in it.
Duly noted.
All right.
Thank
Should
you very
you-
much.
does the same apply for MFT? Okay.
And ideally, maybe you could rotate, even if that you were attending conferences or meetings. But
Yeah,
leave
I
that at
mean,
your discretion.
candidly, like on SciPAC, Patrick is the commissioner for the agency because I simply don't have time to deal with SciPAC as well. So Patrick handles that.
Great. All right. I think that we are on to rulemaking. It's 10:30. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? If that's all right with everybody. And
So we-
personal thing, then I'll see you back. Is that all right?
You want to come back at 10:45?
10:45. How about that?
Okay. All right. We'll be back then.
Okay. Do I need to say anything for the recording?
Just say that we're recessed until 10:45.
Okay. The State of Texas Behavioral Health Council is temporarily recessed for 10 minutes to reconvene at 10:45. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Now you can reconvene it, Madam Chair.
Okay, it's 10:46 a.m. on October 26th, and the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council is back in session.
Okay. And
I
Chair
believe-
Hall,
Yes.
that's
Go
what I'm saying. Chair Hallbauer had a question that he just posed to me. I want to restate just for the record. The question was, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You know the question.
I was gonna say, the question was, how do I determine whether it will be myself or another board member or another staff member that will serve on one of these entities? If a position becomes open, typically what happens is you're either extended an invitation directly from the association or the entity. So they're asking for you specifically, or if it's an open position, say like a board member slot, like on ASPPP, you would visit with the board and say, okay, does anybody here want to run for that? Does anybody want it? If not, I'm thinking about doing it. It's kind of an informal process of how you want to handle it. But most of the stuff I serve on like this is stuff where they have reached out to me directly and said, would you be willing to do this? So it's not really anything where they're just like, pick somebody and send up here.
Okay. No, thanks for that clarification.
We're on to item 4, rulemaking. I believe that last time we visited, we looked at the number entirely and talked about anything we might have an objection to and pulled that out. So if that's acceptable, if that's an acceptable format, I'd love to continue that way.
I think, Madam Chair, that'll be good for BHEX when we get to counseling, which is the only other board with rules. I know there'll be one that I want to talk about.
Sure, and there may be ones that some of you members want to pull out. So looking at item 4, the review and reconsideration of rule changes for the family leave pool, license statuses, provisions applying to military service members, veterans and spouses, and special licensing for military spouses, as well as renew a license. And that's considered an adoption. Okay. Is there anything that a member would like to pull out or anything in particular that someone has remarked? And if not, may I have an entertain to approve as proposed items 4A and B. Please note that B is consideration and adoption.
So moved.
Sorry, who's that, John?
John.
So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second,
All in favor indicate by raising your hands. Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes unanimously. On item 5, rulemaking for the examiners of marriage and family therapists. There's nothing on for either. Okay, so sorry about that. That's for 5, for the Board of Examiners Psychologists, same thing. Nothing for rules for consideration or adoption. On the Texas State Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors, Daryl, this is the one you want to give us some advice on?
Yes, ma'am. And Chair Hallbauer, you don't feel free to step over me here. On 7A2, 681.83 academic course content requirement, I'm going to recommend that the council refer that rule back to the member board for some additional informal stakeholder input. I know TCA has reached out to me and indicated that they would like an opportunity to engage in kind of stakeholder input, stakeholder negotiations on this rule a little bit more. And this is not a rule that's like mission critical to get it done today. It's one where I think we have the time to do it. So I don't think it hurts anything to send it back and have those discussions. So I think just out of kind of a belts and suspenders approach and out of an abundance of caution, we ought to send it back. I'm not suggesting that we send it back because it's got any kind of anti-competitive or administrative inconsistency problem. It doesn't, as far as I can see, but just out of a good governance concern, I'd recommend sending it back and letting them have some informal stakeholder review with this a little bit more.
I support Daryl's recommendation. We're doing an analysis of curriculum requirements. It's a pretty in-depth, substantial change, and I prefer that I was terming it as put a pause on this, but Daryl's recommendation is the proper procedure on this. There's lots of aspects to this, and there's a few things that have been brought to our attention since it was originally sent up from the LPC board. So I'm in support of this basically because we want to hear from more people and we want to do some additional information. So board, Daryl's kind of, frankly, I'll take the hit on this one. I think just the way I like to run things, we should have put a little more time and analysis into this. And so I'm asking today if, with y'all's approval, just give us a little more time because we want to do this right. That's just the best way to put it. We want to do it very deliberately, very reasoned. And if we can have a little more time on it, that'll allow us to do it. Chris, anything to add?
No, you nailed it, buddy.
Okay.
I always think it's better to do things well than do them quickly. That sounds good to me. Any other board member?
Thank you, Chair Canseco. Appreciate that.
The only thing I would say is that we move forward with this rule to help make staff more efficient. So that's kind of our objective here, is to help do our part on the LPC board with lessening the burden on staff so that we can help everyone else. So we can be better at phones and everywhere else. So that's just what we're trying to do.
Then could I hear a formal motion to that effect?
So I'll make the motion that for 7A2 or II, that we send that back to the LPC board for further consideration.
Second?
A second.
second,
Stevens.
All in favor? Any discussion? Sorry, I forgot that part. All in favor signify by raising your hands or at one hand. Dr. Taylor, is that a yes or a no? Yeah, that's what I thought. Any opposed, same sign? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. For 7A, I and triple I, and for 7B, is there a motion to approve as submitted?
Daryl, do you want me to outline those for everybody, or
Would you
not
prefer to
necessary?
take them?
I think it's y'all's preference. I mean, if somebody feels the need to have it outlined, then yeah, but
Why don't we get a second first and then have a discussion?
My apologies, Chair.
Oh, no, that's all right. Thank you, Mr. Francis. I don't know if you all saw him, but he waved his hand. Now, is there any discussion or anything in particular you think we should see? Dr. Halbar, Mr. Halbar, I think it's.
AI, that all that was removing the requirement for written minutes because we moved over to the YouTube channel. And triple I, we had a double listing on our disciplinary recommendations, and that's actually addressed in the next section. So it's kind of superfluous, and we were tidying things up.
I'm going to go on to the proposed rule changes. We can consider them all at once. 7.
Did we need to vote? Did we need to vote on that?
I had to ask for the motion for 7A and B, but if you like. To,
okay.
Maybe I'm.
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Just touch on the second part, the new rules, or is there anything you want to bring to our attention with regard to 7B, I through D?
I think most of those changes that are proposed for adoption, Madam Chair, are they're minor changes. A lot of them are just cleanup changes. Like the 681.73, we're adding, or its successor, because that entity that's listed in the statute and the rule is scheduled to go away or be bought out by another organization. So we had to name it. The licensing of the military folks, that's it's a bigger change, but it brings the change in alignment with how kind of the MFT board does it. They had developed that mechanism first, and I don't know, you may see most of the boards kind of move to that model, that mechanism, the way they have done it. I think it's probably a pretty good system. So, and the LPC board is now, I think they're going to be the second ones to do it. And then the schedule of sanctions one, that's so that Patrick doesn't quit on us, because every time we change something in a substantive rule, we also have to change the schedule of sanctions rule, because the body of the rule is set out in the schedule of sanctions, and he's about to kill me if we don't get that changed. So the LPC board capitulated and said, yeah, we'll do that. So, but in all honesty, a lot of them are very, very minor, non-substantive changes.
There's no other discussion or concerns. We have a motion and a second. Is that right? To approve 7A, 1 and 3, 7B, the Roman numeral thing, I to 6. So 681.41 to 681.205. All in favor indicate by raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes unanimously again. Item 8 for social worker examiners, there are no rules for consideration or adoption. So we can skip that. But now we have a report from the Ad Hoc Standardization Committee. And I wish I remembered who that was, because I don't. Please tell me it's not me.
No, that is going to be Dr. Fletcher,
I just
Ms.
skipped that
Smith,
item.
Dr. Taylor, and Brian Brumley, you're on that one too, aren't you? Yeah, Mr. Brumley. So those are the 4 council members on that.
Who care to report for the standardization?
Don't everybody jump at once.
I'll be happy to say just a few things. I'm very proud of the discussions in the standardization committee. We are talking about a number of issues from the complaint process, the value of continuing education requirements, which we benefited from some materials provided by ASBPB in their recent meeting that show that the research says basically. Dr. Taylor, would you like to say what the research says?
I think it's best that I don't. It's best that I don't.
Because we want to make research-based decisions, don't we? We do. And so there is research that says that the amount of continuing education units, amount of time we spend doing continuing education doesn't really predict a higher level of competency in licensees. And so as we're discussing whether we want to go to 2 continuation, the requirement of 2 hours every 2 years, that's a joke. We are discussing, how many should it be? I, of course, would like it to be 40 for everybody, but the research doesn't support that decision. And so in the standardization committee, we are talking very seriously about what's evidence-based, what does the research show, so that we guide our decisions on informed, valuable information rather than just emotion. So the standardization committee will have things to bring to BHEC very soon. I'm impressed with how productive we are. It's a very tight agenda, very focused on benefiting the public and protecting the public with a variety of differences of opinions, where we illustrate differences of opinions, but not at the expense of our relationships. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on that committee, and there's a lot of work to do. But besides continuing education and supervisory requirements and requirements for supervisors, is there anything else I'm leaving out that's a hot topic we've been addressing? Those are pretty hot and sizzling, and I think we're making some productive progress.
And it's Dr. Fletcher, Dr. Taylor, Mr. Brumley, and did I miss somebody else?
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I do just want to take a moment and just say thank you to my fellow council members. I think this has been an amazing experience, and this is exactly what we wanted to do when we created BHEC, and it is working wonderfully well. I am just blown away by how cordial we are and how respectful we are, and just the input that we get from each other, even when we disagree, quite sternly. And I did not expect CEs to be the over my dead body comments. Like that's not the place where I thought we were going to go, but I mean, we're working through it, and it's great. It's wonderful to learn where the other bodies come from and why they believe firmly in what they believe. So it's been a wonderful process. I'm so excited to be a part of it, and I look forward to solving and helping us come in line. So.
Someday I will tell y'all the story of us almost having to drag Tim Spears' body out of that committee meeting after he made a recommendation that was not well received. Yes, Tim, I threw you under the bus in a statewide meeting.
Hey, Tim, welcome to the club.
But we are respectful and with our diverse opinions and responses, and we're meeting frequently, and everybody is prepared and having conversations with others outside of the standardization committee, so we can represent that to other members of the standardization committee. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And I appreciate all the prep work, so those meetings are very smooth and efficient.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Brumley, anything that you want to add?
No, I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Wow, I think I want to watch.
I know, it's so rare that happens.
Thank you so much. Okay, the ad hoc fee review committee. I understand there are recommended fee changes and a discussion regarding a timeline.
Let me pull up that spreadsheet so that everybody can see what we're talking about here. Because I want everybody to be able to see this. Okay, this committee is one. It's Mr. Blimwitz and Mr. Francis are the board liaisons. I don't think there's anybody else. It's just the two of you, right?
Well,
Okay.
somebody who stepped away. I can't remember who that was.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, that's right. It's just John and George. They're the council liaisons to this committee. And The remainder of the committee is made up of a representative from each of the state associations. So it's actually quite a large committee. Now, I will tell you, they reached an agreement where honestly, I didn't think one would be reached. I was pleasantly surprised and shocked at this. What you're seeing here, I'll shut up. George, John, y'all do it. Y'all are the ones that kind of ramrodded this thing.
Truth be known, Daryl, you put together the effort and the work behind it, but what I would say is that the agreement pretty much looked like the revenue, it's column J, correct? Am I looking at this correctly, Daryl?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So column J, which means that we'll provide a little bit less funds than what we previously provided back to the state of Texas. But in response, what that also means is that we would not have any increases in fees to any of the associations that are attached to this. Some of the thoughts that came out of the meeting that maybe this is not the appropriate time now, but a year down the road after we're fully in sync with all the different groups, is that we would have a standard fee amount for any application, with the thought that it's one body of work, it's one group of people doing that, and as such, that fee should be standardized. Now, as Daryl pointed out, there are those times where an association might have one or two additional steps required as part of the application process. And if that's the case, then maybe that fee gets increased a little bit to compensate, to adjust for those increases of work or effort that's required. But that the group collectively decided this is probably not the straight time to go with a flat fee like that. Maybe a year out after we get some more experience with the different agencies in the application process. And so this was the recommendation unanimously from the group to bring back to this body.
And
When
give,
Daryl,
go ahead, John.
when Daryl was closing it out, I forget what exactly you said, but you were like, does anybody else want to talk about this? And it was met with crickets. So it was well discussed. And I pointed out in a group of mental health practitioners, we had talked about it a lot and no one had to talk about it anymore. So it was a lot of work went into this. And yeah, and to echo what Daryl said, I was like, we were kind of arguing about like, there's a pie that we have to like bring back to the state, and how are we going to divide this thing up again? Because there was really, I didn't see a way where, you had to rob Peter to pay Paul. Like it was kind of a zero-sum game. And for the fact that we got to this, I think is really commendable by all the stakeholders to have arrived at something like this.
So that the public understands how this worksheet works, because I know I got to keep reminding myself, y'all didn't sit in the committee meetings, so you may not understand how this works. This is the actual worksheet that the committee used to make its decision. You're not looking at anything that we've put together specific for this meeting. This is what the committee worked off of. Y'all can all see this on the screen, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
This column B here, this represents the current fee amounts, both application and renewal fees that you're paying now as a licensee or an applicant. Column B represents what you pay right now. What the committee has recommended is column D. Now, column D has 75%. Column F is what they have recommended. Now, what column F represents is the lesser of either what you're currently being charged now or 75% of the national average. Now, you may ask, well, where'd you come up with 75% of the national average? That comes from a letter that all agencies received from Governor Abbott back in 2018, where he instructed agencies to conduct a study and see where their fees lied, whether it was over or above 75% of the national average. His point being is he wanted us to be at or below 75% of the national average on fees if we could. What the committee has come up with here is we can hit that target that Governor Abbott has set. Now, and then what George had pointed out was in revenue in column J, this is the revenue that's generated when you use the lesser of or 75% of the national average. Now, here's why that's important, folks. We have to,
What is the F21 number? It just says number. H,
F21.
column H.
Column H, Daryl, fiscal
Column
year
H.
21.
That's what we're using now, fiscal year.
Oh,
21?
this is the number of either applicants or licensees,
Got it.
is what you're looking at there.
Okay, got it.
So,
I'm
let's
already
see.
editing the damn form. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
I think on Excel. I don't think in my head like George did.
okay, so column J is the revenue that's generated from the 75% or lesser of fees. Now, let me jump back on column F. If everybody will know at column, if you'll notice, your fees either stayed the same as what they are or they went down. Nobody's fees went up. That's how we were able to arrive at this without any bloodletting, I think, because nobody had to pay more than what they were before. My hat's off to y'all for arriving at that. I don't know who. I think Jenny Nowak was probably the one that worked this chart up originally, but anyway, that's how we got to where we are now. Let me point out here the BRE. Most of y'all probably won't know what that means. It's the baseline revenue estimate. That's the amount of money that the LBB says we have to bring in every year. Currently, it's a little over $6 million. Every year it's a little over $6 million. You'll notice in column J, the amount of money we bring in is only 5,100. So, and of course we get direct and indirect. Anyway, long story short, if we go with the figure in column J, if we set the fees at 75%, the lesser of 75% or our current fees, we'll generate $5.1 million every year. That is more than enough to cover the costs of operating the agency, which are right here. But that only leaves us with an excess revenue of $372,000. Now, our BRE says we're supposed to be bringing in $6 million. So that's where the shortfall comes. And the difference between this amount and this amount, that's the much ballyhooed money that goes into the GR fund that everybody always complains about, saying, look, we generate more than it costs to operate the agencies. That's what we're talking about shrinking here. We're not actually talking about shrinking the amount of money that the agency itself has to work with. We're talking about shrinking the amount of excess revenue that we send back to GR every year. Now, here's the problem. That money is already built into the state budget elsewhere. So before we can do this, I mean, we're not even proposing this change yet today. Before we can do this, I'm going to have to go to the LBB and the comptroller, and I want to make sure, if I can, I don't know that they'll agree to it, but I'm going to try to get them to see if they'll give us an okay or a green light to do this. Because what I don't want to do is us propose and adopt the rule, and then we only send them a check for $370,000, and they're like, "Where's the other 800,000 or 900,000 you were supposed to send in?" We don't want to get in that position. That will be a bad spot to be in. So before we ever propose this rule, I'm going to try to go to the LBB and the comptroller, get them to kind of bless it, give us their okay. Then we can come back, propose the rule, and then implement it. Now, I'm just going to be candid with you. You're probably looking at the end of 2022 to 2023 before the rule change can actually be implemented because of the rulemaking timeline itself. The first we could propose this rule will be at the February BHEC board meeting. But we've also got some major database programming changes that are going to occur between the spring and late summer, and they're going to freeze the database. So there won't be any changes that have to occur in the database during that time. So we've got some things we're going to have to work around. Plus, Jenny and Linda, who are our accounting staff, they are also working on moving the agency over to something called CAPS Financial, which I don't know how I would say it other than you would probably rather poke yourself in the eye with a sharp stick than have to deal with that transition. It is not a pleasant thing to go through. And I need them focused on that right now rather than building these changes into the database. So we're still a little ways out, but honestly, folks, we've done the hard part. You've got the agreement as to what the fees should be. That's, in my opinion, that's the vast majority. That was the hardest work right there. Now we've got to convince the LBB and the comptroller to let us do it. And so that's what Jenny and I are going to work on next. But I just wanted everybody to see what see what that figure was. And I think this spreadsheet is in the public meeting materials, so everybody has it. If you want the actual spreadsheet, you can email me at the admin executive leadership through the contact us web form. I'll send you the actual spreadsheet because you can actually play with the numbers in it. Jenny has it built where you can play with the numbers and it'll change it over here. And you can see how the committee came up with this. But that's all I have on that, Madam Chair.
I think it's really just, again, commendable in terms of what we've talked about in terms of sending money back to the state. We're figuring out how to reduce fees. It reinforces a culture of being good stewards of the budget money we have while delivering on what we're supposed to deliver on. So thank you to all involved.
Great. The columns that are 86%, and those are in there just as a negotiating point. So let's say they come back and say, oh my gosh, we need more than 372,000. Or was it just an information point?
That was something that had been suggested by another committee member. That was actually what I think kickstarted a lot of this. Is one of the committee members had come up with 86% as being revenue neutral, and so we looked there, and then we got to thinking, well, that's a little bit of a fee cut. I can't remember now if it would have required an increase in fees or not, but for whatever reason, we decided not to go with the 86% and we went with the 75%, the lesser of. I honestly can't remember all the discussions about it.
Yeah, just curious.
But it's in there because it was something that the committee looked at and worked through. So,
well, and because you have, if somebody gives you like an LBB, is that legislative budget board?
yes,
and
ma'am.
learning these things, that then it could be a negotiating point because it's still less than what the current fees. Well, this is really exciting stuff. We're doing better and we're doing it less expensively, and that helps to address the number of folks who can qualify. I love it. Any other comments? Or are we something we're supposed to talk about? This is just a discussion, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else?
I'll have a report from you on what I hear from the LBB and the comptroller at the next meeting.
Thank you.
I'll probably keep y'all up to speed in between the meetings, just with an email, just to let you know as it develops.
Thank you. And thanks to George and John for doing this. It's like a lot of work. I love spreadsheets. All right.
I just have to say thanks to staff and all of the members of it. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Jenny and Linda in particular, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Jenny and Linda are the accounting staff.
Right.
I will say the committee did a really good job of, you could tell people had actually read it and done their homework. You know, sometimes you show up to things and you can tell, well, gosh, nobody's read their homework. But they actually did it. So my hat's off to them there, because this is not an interesting topic, really, but they did it. So.
Thank you. Item 11 is a report from member boards regarding the issues that might impact the profession, specifically 11A. I think this is councilman. Dr. Taylor is going to. You know, I wish this could address people asking about car warranties as well. Anyone ever says yes, I'm sure the whole world's going to go up with fireworks. So, Dr. Taylor?
I'm sorry, Chair Conseco, it's a little hard to hear a little bit.
Oh, sure. It's discussion regarding the scams that are targeting licensed professionals and the resources that are available to licensees for dealing with scammers.
Perfect, thank you. Obviously, with the rise in the use of the internet and social media and email, we see a lot more scams. I think this is just kind of prevalent throughout all industries. I find it particularly disturbing to see people preying on therapists who are just at their core highly empathic individuals that just care about everybody and want to help people. So it's kind of sad. But nevertheless, it does happen. I've seen in my practice as well has actually been targeted by a few, various phishing scams, but more so we've had actual like real intense scams. One we call the police scam, where somebody pretends to be a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, and they call and they say, you missed court, you didn't respond to a subpoena that was served. And then they put you in the state of terror saying that you're going to go to jail. And then they get like a Visa gift card and give them the number over the phone. And it's really sad. And I've seen other therapists email me about this. People have actually been caught up in it. I've seen some news articles about it as well. So it does happen nationally. We also had, a guy call us from a different country asking to, he was going to give his limo driver like $800 and wanted the limo driver to pay us for his kid's therapy up front, and then you pay out the limo driver and then you find out that the check doesn't, the check bounces or whatever, right? And we've seen what we like to call the Canadian scam. A couple from Canada emails you and says they heard about how fantastic you are and they want to come down and pay you for 10 sessions up front. But then they accidentally overpay you and then you give them the difference in the overpayment and then the check bounces. So we've seen a lot of different ones like that. I've heard a lot of people email me and just call and say, man, like, what do we do about this stuff? How do we help our therapists? I don't really know. I don't have an answer, but I definitely wanted to have a discussion about it. I know our role here is to protect the public, but I think also protecting our therapists is a way to do that. So I don't know if we need to create some FAQs on our website, or if maybe it's like empowering our stakeholders to assist with this, or just doing some education. I'm not really sure. I just wanted to have a discussion about it and bring it up and see what we could do.
I can tell you that this is happening, all over the country. I'm seeing it in my industry, and now we're starting to get phone messages. So a notice comes to your email saying we have 5 phone messages that have, and it says a similar situation. My son happens to be in the cybersecurity industry, and he tells me that it's just blowing up this year. So it's a concern for all of us. I think an FAQ page would be awesome for BHEC to have, if that's our budget.
Yeah, Chris, I've been thinking about this and kind of building on what Patrick had put together, recommendations for the social media policy. And if you want to, I'll work with you and whoever else wants to join. We can have recommendations for kind of spotting these scams before they get too far. And we can kind of put that document along with our social media recommendations as sort of, like Chair Canseco was saying, like a FAQ, but just sort of here's some helpful suggestions. The state bar keeps like a running list of scams that target attorneys, but it's not exactly helpful unless you want to go refer to it and see and double check on something. And I don't want to obligate staff to have to do that, but if we could draft a kind of best practices guidelines or suggestions that we can put out there along with our other helpful document on social media, I'm happy to help you with that.
And I'd be happy to do that as well. I will not do it myself, but I'll leave on my son. Comes over about at least once a week or so.
Hey, another thing is, I think an aspect to this is how therapists can recognize if one of their clients is the target of a scam. And I always kind of think of that in terms of elder exploitation and how to spot that and kind of know how to handle it when they suspect that that's going on.
One option y'all do have is, like, this Friday, the executive staff and I are putting on something called Insights Over the Lunch Hour. It's just a brief presentation by staff where we're going to open ourselves up to questions and just let folks ask whatever they want to ask. Given our virtual reach, you board members could easily put on something like that. We could put it together and put y'all, we used to call them traveling road shows at Psychology, but we could do it virtually. Just do a 1 or hour and a half long, something over the lunch hour. If y'all want to do something like that.
Chris, to kind of piggyback on this, and Chair Canseco, this was part of our MFT board report. This was also kind of brought up at our member board meeting recently, last week, also concerning this whole idea of coaching and how detrimental that can be to the public, to help them understand the difference between if they hire a coach versus if they hire someone with a license. We have a member that was brought up on sexual abuse charges, has turned in their license and is now actively doing the same thing, but billing themselves now as just a coach. And so I would love something where we add in the coaching aspect of this to our dog and pony show.
Smart idea. So sounds like a group of us is going to get together. So Dr. Taylor, Mr. Hallbauer, maybe Janine, maybe you join us. And I will get together instead of imposing on staff, maybe present something for you, Daryl, to refine and look at it. Does that sound all right? Is it a formal committee or are we just going to gather?
It does. Chair, I would like to break it up by topic though, Janine. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I do think we need to have that discussion. I would like to have it separately than scams because I think scams are targeting the licensee, while as the coaching discussion is more about educating the public on what's the difference between our profession and an unregulated coaching profession, which I think is a very important discussion. I would like to have them separate. Thank you.
Why don't the four of us get together informally and then let's add this as an agenda item for the next, let's start it with a conversation. And then we can add this to the next agenda item. Is that all right with you for the next agenda? Daryl, does that work? Do you need a formal motion or is?
No. Are y'all wanting to actually do a presentation before the next council meeting in February? Or?
I think we should come up with some ideas first.
If you're wanting to kind of war game it and see what you want to do.
Right, and then report back in February.
Yeah.
You don't really need a formal motion for that. I mean, y'all can do that. And then whatever you bring back, then we'll vote on it.
Madam Chair, if I can, my initial thought would just be, FAQ page, 1 hour lunch and learn kind of thing. If that can be recorded and posted on our website, that'd be great. And then 3 is kind of like empowering the stakeholders, so TCA, APA, those stakeholders to also champion that as well for their licensees and for their membership and kind of move forward with that. That could be a good place to start.
Okay, why don't we spend the next week gathering some information and then let's get together. I'll send out an email to the 3 of you and see if we can gather virtually or on a conference call or something.
Thank you, Chair Kinseka. I think what I would like to see is if one of our therapists thinks, okay, this is a little different, something seems off, so they have a place to go and check and see if what they have been hit up with is on the list of the red flags that they need to watch for. I think we can put that together.
Resource page. Okay. Great, I'll be in touch. Any other discussion on item 11? Anyone else? Anything that they've experienced or think we ought to take a look at? Daryl, this is reminding me of the agency that we identified that was posing as a state agency. Do we know what happened with that?
I don't. Patrick, do you have any kind of an update on that?
I do not, have not been updated on it, so I don't have anything to report on it.
Didn't the AG kind of tell us to quit asking? Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I thought.
What do you mean? Quit asking.
Well, I had actually offered, I think we actually offered, or I wanted to, I said, look, if y'all need a plaintiff to sue them, I'm like, you can use us. I mean, I'll sign off on as the plaintiff. And they never did take me up on that. So I don't know if they've ever filed suit against that individual or not.
Does the board have to act, or can I request I want to know what's going on, period.
Well, what we can do is, since you're the chair, Patrick can contact me again and go, look, the chair is asked to know what is going on with this, so that it's not just us doing it. But I got the distinct impression that they were tired of talking to me, and told
Too
me.
bad.
as
I want to know
much.
what's happening. That sounds awful to me. And if
Well-
y'all want to join in on a vote, that's fine. And if not, I still want to know what's happening.
You
Daryl?
get it, Gloria. You
We'll
get
see-
it.
We'll see what we can find out, and I'll just tell them, if you don't tell me, I'm going to give them your direct line, and
That's fine with me.
they can deal with you directly.
They might have it. Okay, yeah, I would. I'd like to know. I think that was awful.
Yeah.
Individual.
She was pushy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she was pushy, says Brenda. Oh, you're on. I forgot. My partner in crime over here. We both want to know. Okay, thank you. I would like to know. Anything else? Well, I guess we kind of slid into item 12. Any other recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting? Okay, if something comes up, pass it to Daryl, and I think it's time for general public comments. Folks, we are using the raise hand feature. You have 3 minutes to speak, and Daryl will start calling on you one at a time. So if there's some comment that you'd like to make, please use the raise hand feature.
Patrick's going to serve as our timekeeper, so here we go.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Martin, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
I think you're
Sandra?
muted.
I
Son.
do. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm interested in the fact that you ended up on the subject of traveling road shows and things of that nature. Social work board meeting, there was a question about maybe people were complaining apparently about too many the jurisdiction exam, too many questions about BHEC. I'm hearing just the opposite. I am seeing that anytime the people are finding out there's a way to contact you and a way to hear you and a way to watch you work, they want to take advantage of that. I personally was startled when I think it was Mr. Spinks mentioned at a meeting that there were 1,400 people signed up for that noontime lunch. And that was a couple weeks ago. And I'm still getting questions from people. Can I still sign up? Can I still sign up? And my answer is, there's way over 1,400 by now. Why don't you wait for the next opportunity? So I'm just here. I'm a liaison for Christian Counselors of Texas. It may be that we're behind in that matter. I don't know. We're catching up. But certainly from our perspective, Christian Counselors of Texas, we want to know. We want to know not just how to do this or how to do that. We want to know how the boards work together, how they communicate together, how they work together with BHEC. In particular, I think we're realizing what kind of impact this shift has on our practice long-term. We're seeing lawsuits filed here and there about all kinds of things. And so anything at all, I would encourage you to do anything at all that you can do to get out to the public and talk to the public and do a road show or lunchtime stuff or whatever. Please reach out and let them get to know you and see you, because they're really hungry to do that. And so thank you. Enjoyed watching you work this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Sarter, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Dr. Terry.
Hold on, Terry. Hold on. Sorry, that was my fault.
Thank you, Mr. Speaks. My name is Dr. Terry Ann Sarter, and I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor, counselor educator, and the BHEC liaison to the Texas Counseling Association. First, TCA does support the development of a workforce study and appreciates the work put into developing a drafted survey. We also look forward to engaging in a review and feedback opportunity during the stakeholder feedback sessions to occur at a later date before the finalized workforce study survey is launched. Additionally, I want to thank the BHEC members for sending the proposed rules back to the Texas State Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors for further consideration. This process can assist in ensuring stakeholders have the forum to verbally comment on the proposed rule changes before moving forward in the process. During the current concern revolves around the change in course requirements, which would remove several essential courses from being required to optional. A change such as this one could negatively impact the profession of counseling and could bring about undue harm to the public. Previously, when the LPC board considered modifications to the independent practice of LPC associates, they engaged in a dynamic process, considered input from an array of reputable sources, and proposed new rules that reflect considerations that were not initially considered by the Rules Committee. It is unclear why a similar process was not in place when this course content requirements were being considered. TCA appreciates the new BHEC level processes created as related to the fee structure task force and rules and standardization task force. Due to the successes of these processes, it may be helpful to extend a similar process to the licensing boards. If the Texas State Board of Examiners and Professional Counselors Rule Committee meetings are not made public, this could provide an additional avenue for the board to consider input from a range of reputable sources. Ensuring that stakeholders have the opportunity to contribute ideas and discussion points can assist the council in following the mission as stated on the BHEC website. We appreciate and respect the hard work of the volunteer boards. Please consider these comments along with the comments of other stakeholders, as they can provide insight to unintended consequences not previously considered and work with the board on solutions. Again, thank you for sending section 681.83 of the Texas Administrative Code back to the Texas State Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors for further discussion and for allowing them to hear the voices of stakeholders prior to voting. Thank you, and I appreciate your time, service, and dedication.
Thank you, Dr. Sartor.
Dr. Ibanez Lorente, do you have public
Yes.
comments you want to give?
I do. Thank you. My name is Dr. Kathy Ibanez Llorente. I'm an LPC supervisor and the program coordinator and associate professor in the professional counseling program at Texas State University. LPC board chair Steve Halbauer's decision to send back proposed rules regarding 681.83 academic course content back to the LPC board is appreciated. This will allow the LPC board to seek feedback from stakeholders, professional association liaisons, and additional experts in the field regarding the unintended consequences of the proposed rules. Due to the impact these rule changes will have on the counseling profession, engagement with stakeholders prior to publication for public comment is critical. Efforts are underway across the United States to adopt the Interstate Counseling Compact. The goal of the Counseling Compact is to advance portability, safeguard a strong professional counselor identity, and protect the public by ensuring the highest standards for licensed professional counselors across participating states. Participation by Texas in the Counseling Compact will expedite credentialing of professional counselors seeking to relocate to and practice in Texas, as has been seen with SciPAC. Texas is at the very first steps of enacting the Professional Counselor Licensure Compact Act. Texas is fortunate to have several professional counselors working on the Counseling Compact, myself included as part of the advisory group that created the compact language. Their input on proposed modifications to course requirements would help avoid the unintended consequences of excluding Texas from this innovative solution to help address portability of licensure and to increase the mental health workforce in Texas. I appreciate and respect the hard work of the volunteer boards and encourage the continued collaboration with stakeholders who can provide insight into unintended consequences not previously considered and who can work with the LPC board on solutions. Thank you again for sending the rules back to the LPC board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ibanez.
Ms. Kimball, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
I do. I'm an LPC associate, so I'm speaking from a different perspective. And I might have missed it, but I did not hear the issue come up about us operating independently. And I had sent in my comments because over this last month in November, I lost my meager income of $2,000 because I cannot take my own payments. And so I have been in search of someone to take my payments. If an associate decides not to go into an institution and we want to provide mental health care as a private practitioner, we're stumped. And so today I am going to pay for a rental, a lease, and I am with a wonderful psychiatrist who is willing to take my payments. But it puts us in this position where we are so dependent on finding people. Some people find that unethical to not belong to their practice. And like if I was going to do telehealth, there's just a lot of issues, and I know I only have 3 minutes, but I want you to know from the associate's perspective, I hear your interest in providing mental health care to the public, and this kind of stonewalls us to not be able to do that, even though we're licensed. I am licensed. I've got about 400 hours left to go, and I can't help people because I can't get someone to take my payments. I have done it for a month for free, but I have expenses as an associate, as you all know, and I need to cover those. So I really would love for you guys to push this through. I pay all my other expenses as a business owner, except I can't take payment. It just doesn't make sense. And the reason I would like the question to be asked, why not do it? Why not? I think you'll find less reason not to do it than to have these arguments about doing it and the other boards do it. And I thought the idea was to streamline. I see Patrick give me hand signals, I'm distracted, but I think you get my point. It's crucial for us to be able to function and provide the public with mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kimball, that is occurring. That rule is being processed.
Yeah, it's been published in the Texas Register. So what will happen is after all the comment period is closed, that those comments that we gather will go back to the LPC board for consideration. They will then give their recommendation as to whether to adopt the rule, not adopt it, make changes. They will give that recommendation to the council. That's the process it has to follow. So the council can't do anything until the LPC board has had a chance to pass judgment on the comments received.
Daryl, those public comments are open through October 31st at 5 o'clock.
Okay. So everybody that's watching with that issue in mind, you still got time to comment on that. Just look it up in the register, follow the directions for submitting public comment in the register. There are specific places that you have to send comments to. It's a specific email address, rules@bhec.texas.gov. Okay. Miss Faisal?
Yes, it's Dr. Melinda Faisal. Thank you. I'm with Christian Counselors of Texas and LeTourneau University. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you guys. I just renewed my license in September and it was a smooth process. I received my postcard with easy instructions for fingerprinting. So I'm not sure why you're receiving complaints because it was very smooth. The online process was fantastic. I did run into a technical snag when I was trying to submit my CE documentation. I sent an email to tech support. I had an answer within 24 hours. So thank you. It was a great experience and I really liked the online submission. So thank you.
And just for everyone's, this was not a paid endorsement or advertisement. Ms. Epstein, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, hi there. My name is Sarah Epstein. I am an LMFT both in Texas and in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for having me. I will try to be brief. I just recently finished transferring my license from Pennsylvania, and I'm so sorry to say it was nothing short of an absolute nightmare. And you are talking to a woman who just moved across the country with a toddler. Okay. There was so much that was unclear. I'm happy to help, by the way, if you guys need someone to know, like, what are the questions coming up, right? It wasn't clear what happened to me if I submitted my paperwork and the board said, we'll take this, we won't accept these other hours. It wasn't clear to me that it wasn't a cut and dry rejection or acceptance. I thought I was gonna, if it wasn't accepted, I was gonna have to move here and start over because nowhere on the website does it say, if we don't accept all of your hours, here's the next step. You get a supervisor, you become an LMS FTA, and you go back through the pipeline. It wasn't clear that not only did I need 2 years, I needed 104 weeks of supervision. Anyone working any job isn't expected to work 52 weeks a year. So I ended up with 2 years of experience, but Pennsylvania didn't hold me to 52 weeks a year. So that wasn't clear. It wasn't clear to me when I moved here that I needed a Texas license to do telehealth with Pennsylvania clients, some of whom I still work with. That hasn't been updated. I actually know other people, including an ethics professor who was visiting family here and didn't know she couldn't continue to see her Pennsylvania clients without a Texas license, right? It wasn't clear, it's not in the LMFTA upgrade checklist that you might get audited for your CEUs, right? So there's just all of this stuff. My verification got stuck because all the other states don't necessarily have your new BHEC email addresses. So when they sent the verification letter to Texas, they sent it to the old email address. And that can cause snafus in the system. I just want to recommend have a box on the BHEC website. What are your most important questions? Like start gathering the data. And then once you get 10 people who say, hey, I don't understand how this works, you can update the website in real time. Other recommendation, the biggest single issue that you guys touched on in this meeting was that there is no way to get in touch with a human being. For most of COVID, when I'd call, the phone would ring and then it would pick up from Verizon Wireless. I've never felt, I've never felt so powerless. Yeah, the other thing, to answer your question about how to help against scams, maybe have put out some stuff, not just about how to pick out scams, but maybe helping people put in good procedures in place. Because if they have good procedures for their practices, this is how we do payments, this is how we do set up appointments, people won't deviate from that. And that way you're helping people kind of get their practices in order and they're not going to fall for the scams because, it's part of my policy. I don't take 10 sessions in advance.
3 minutes.
That's time. Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you so much.
Okay.
NASW Texas, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, this is Will Francis from NASW Texas, and I'll be brief. I really appreciate the meeting today. Just wanted to echo Ms. Martin's comments about trying to get out there and get in touch with as many people around Texas as possible. I think an opportunity for that is conferences. I would really encourage this BHEC to approve and support members attending conferences, be those with the various associations, be those with others that focus strictly on behavioral health. It's a way, I think, of getting in front of a whole lot of people. I know that we have so appreciated in the past having attendance at our conference. We had Dale Spinks this year through virtual, and in the past we had, back when it was Alice Bradford, her in person. But it gave people a chance to ask questions and interact and just really get in and really humanize who the board was. And so if there's a way to do that, I appreciate it. From a fingerprinting standpoint, I think we need to be a little bit cautious. I heard a whole lot in this meeting about sort of people not having the right address or people throwing cards away. The number of people I've talked to who have had the right address in and did not receive that card is pretty big. I think we've done a great job in sort of promoting what's happening with fingerprinting. And I know hopefully we're getting to a place where this will be done and behind us, but I just really want to be cautious about pointing the finger at the people who are trying their hardest to get their license done and who are often confused and not certain about what's going on. So just really want to be a little bit cautious about that. And then finally, so appreciative of the workforce study, looking to put some data into that, and just really want to thank you all for prioritizing that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Mr. Gomez, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, thank you. My name is Ruben Gomez. I'm a licensed professional counselor, supervisor here in Texas, and I serve as the BHEC liaison for the Texas Association of Counselor Education and Supervision. And I wanted to make a statement and raise some questions for thought regarding the 681.83 academic course content proposal changes from a supervision perspective. First, I wanted to say thank you for sending the proposal back to the LPC board. My statement is, when teaching competencies in areas or course content where LPC associates did not complete in their graduate studies, how will the supervisor determine if the supervisee is competent? In graduate courses, there's an expectation of a letter grade of B or better to determine the competency. But how much time will the supervisor have to dedicate in teaching these things to make up for that? How much teaching time should be required before allowing the supervisee to engage with the client in those areas? If education requirements are optional, Many associates may be practicing outside of their scope of practice and training, and the LPC supervisor may be put in a position to inform the employment site or the business owner that they cannot provide services without undergoing specific specialized training, which will cause additional costs for the supervisee. Not all LPCSs have had a pedagogy training. Is the board responsible to determine the teaching skills of a supervisor? This reduction of education standards may further limit the number of LPC supervisors that a supervisee can select from, because the LPCS may not select to be responsible or supervise an associate that has not been fully educated in the right 8 core areas of counseling, as well due to the extended commitment of the requirement training needed to ensure competency. The rules and regulations are intended to protect the client and the public. However, by lessening the standards, this is actually failing the community. LPC associates, LPCs, and LPC supervisors. There would likely be an increase in complaints from LPC associates if the supervisor requires remediation and
30
finds
seconds.
to be competent. And then last point,
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. I think you're out of time. Is that right, Patrick? Oh, 3 seconds. Go ahead.
30 seconds, sorry.
30 seconds, sorry.
Yeah, last statement. Graduate school lays the foundation for LPC supervision is built upon competence for fine-tuning the skills in non-academic training in less restrictive settings. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bush, did you have public comments you wanted to make?
Yes, I did. Thank you for having me at the meeting, and I so appreciate all the service that each and every one of you all are doing to hear our comments. I wanted to comment on the proposed rule changes of 681.2. And to let you know, I've been a licensed professional counselor supervisor in the state of Texas since 2001, so 20 years. And in reviewing those rule changes, I am not starting any new intern groups. I believe that each one of the issues presented puts undue liability upon a supervisor that I am unwilling to assume. The first point, LPC associates would be able to own their own practice. I'm not completely opposed to that. I think that there is a spirit of exploitation out there amongst providers. I try to just disassociate myself from those providers and not engage business with them. But I think interns need a lot more protection from the people that they work for. And that's some of what's driving this, this particular point. The other two, as far as records and accepting payments, again, if there's problems with that or exploitation, I don't want the liability for assuming someone else is going to be responsible to that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Bush.
Alyssa, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, yes, my name is Elisa Karsagi. You guys know me. I for some reason, I didn't have my last name in there. I apologize for that. But I wanted to take this time to say thank you because recently there was an update in the complaint that I've been speaking out now for a couple of years. And so I did want to say thank you for that, but also wanted to speak today to, I guess, just renew my concerns, that despite the fact that this is moving forward, that, there's still no resolution yet. And so I just want to, have it out there that, we do want to encourage that, that would continue to move forward, that it would not be, I guess that it would not just end there, that there would be action, that action would be proportional to what's been done, because it was very serious allegations that were made in those complaints. And, I just want to thank you guys again for being there. I am, having listened to this meeting, I was concerned at the beginning about the number of dismissals that took place because, in my mind, dismissal doesn't necessarily mean resolution. And so when I look at the number of complaints that go to SOA and the number of complaints that, are closed but not necessarily handled, I do have concerns because I know as someone who's not an attorney, who's not a psychologist, trying to, I guess, keep up with the ethics and the rules and the rule changes and to figure out, which ones apply, that's something that's very daunting for an average person. And so I do have concerns that if my complaint is to be dismissed, that it would be because I'm not an attorney and I'm not a psychologist. And so, I guess I would encourage you guys and to encourage, those who are reviewing this case, to please remember that members of the public don't have as much of an education. And we do still expect results, and we do expect those results to match, what was done. And so I do want to say thank you again for your time and for listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Karsagi, and we're all happy that your case has been raised.
Ms. Huber, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time to hear us today. Having known Alyssa for years, I know that she loves both of her boys and stands strong. And I'm here to advocate for her, that we make sure that we continue to push forward with people that aren't necessarily licensed social workers or licensed psychologists, that we are able to help them understand and push forward so that people like Dr. Arnando is not taking advantage of, and that we stand firm, stand strong, that we come together along with everybody else, that these mothers are not taken advantage of, and that we as a public push forward, that we find a resolution for this. Thank you again for your time and hearing us.
Thank you, Ms. Huber.
Ms. Vasiri, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Fetchery, and I wanted to reiterate what Alyssa said, and thank you for, hearing our public's concerns and moving her complaint forward. And we all are very grateful to see movement on this, and hope that there will be resolution, like she said, proportional to the allegations, because as she said, and the reason that we keep showing up is because we are members of the public. We're not attorneys, we're not psychologists, but we do understand when something wrong is being done and when justice is not being served. And that's what we are here for, to keep those people accountable. And so when we keep showing up, we're doing so not in vain, in hope that something will actually be done to bring about justice and resolution. So we just, again, are grateful to see this moving forward, and hope that not only her case gets resolved proportionately, but others as well, because we know it's not just her. I apologize, my baby in the background. It's not just her suffering, but there are other members of the public as well. And we want to continue to stand up and speak out for them, because especially if they can't speak for themselves, especially the children, the minors, we will speak for them. So again, thank you.
Sherry.
or Ah, do you have public comments you'd like to give?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't written my whole name. My name is Ann Hartley, and I'm just here as a concerned member of the public regarding Dr. Armando's complaints. And I just implore you to take action as soon as possible regarding these issues, because they're very, very large complaints that need action taken on them. And my understanding that it's taken years to get movement in these complaint issues. So I thank you for hearing me out and for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley.
Sharon, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Yes, I'm just echoing again in support of Alyssa Karsagi. When I spoke to the panel previously,
Can you state your full name for the record, please?
Sharon Hackner. When I spoke to the panel previously, I was very hopeful that all of the comments collectively would be taken into consideration, and that the complaints made against Dr. Arredondo would be investigated more thoroughly. And we were so incredibly appreciative of the fact that there was movement on the case. And we just want to continue to see movement toward a resolution where Alyssa can finally be reunited with her children. It's very difficult for her and for all of us that a mother could be dismissed as a mother because of the reasons that were outlined, what we believe as falsely. And Alyssa's a wonderful caretaker for all of our children in whatever setting it is, informal, and she always looks after all of our children with so much love. And she really, really misses her own children. And we just want to see them reunited in whatever way the panel can assist in that department. We would be very greatly appreciative of that.
Thank you, Ms. Epping. I don't see any more hands raised.
That concludes the public comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think that's it. If there's no other discussion, then may I entertain a move to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes, and thanks, everyone. We'll see you again in February.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
I told you.